Welcome, everyone. I now call the May 12th, 2026 regular City Council meeting to order. We'll start by taking a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Councilmember Aguilari.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alderks.
Here.
Councilmember Kurt.
Here.
Councilmember Miles.
Here.
Councilmember Dodd.
Here.
Councilmember Alcabra.
Here.
All present.
Thank you very much. Next up, we're going to move to the meeting agenda approval, and first is the city manager review of the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm still working on the new script.
I know.
It's getting there.
We're going to find our rhythm. Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. We have a lengthy meeting agenda tonight with a few highlights that include Council will be issuing 3 proclamations. So welcome to those who are here to accept for both for Safe Boating and Paddling Week, Affordable Housing Week, and Mental Health Awareness Month. The City Manager's report also includes 4 updates for you tonight. So we'll get to those here very shortly, but it also includes a conversation about the proposed draft agenda for the joint meeting with the Shoreline Fire RFA Board next week, which it was emailed to you earlier this afternoon. Council will later be asked to consider a projected agenda item from the Deputy Mayor about flying the Disability Pride flag in the month of July. And there's also several items for approval, both on the consent calendar and also with presentations, which includes formalizing flying the LGBTQIA+ Progress Pride flag in June, some property easements, both temporary and permanent, as well as adoption of recently discussed code establishing legal consequences in Bothell for exposing a minor child to domestic violence. At the conclusions of tonight's meeting is a study session on affordable housing and multifamily tax exemption code update proposals for consideration, as well as a periodic training of compliance of the Open Governments Training Act. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to consider adoption of tonight's meeting agenda.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Council, are there any changes to tonight's agenda that somebody would like to propose? Thank you. There is not. We'll move on to public engagement opportunities. Arts Alive Art Walk and Collage Workshop. Meet artist Matthew McCoy, who is currently featured at our City Hall Gallery, and learn more about his work at the Arts Alive Art Walk. Artist Andrea Lewicki will also host a collage workshop. That's Thursday, May 14th from 5 to 8 p.m. here in the City Hall lobby. Wayne Open Space Action Plan Open House. Join the second open house for the Wayne Open Space Action Plan. You can get an update on the project, explore preliminary design concepts, and speak with park staff and project consultants. That's Thursday, May 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. again right here in City Hall. Summer in Bothell is almost here. Bothell's summer event lineup is now available. We've got a variety of exciting events for all ages to enjoy all summer long. There's something for everyone. Listen to live music, watch a movie under the stars, or attend a family-friendly performance. And next up is proclamations. We're going to start with Safe Boating and Paddling Week. As soon as I pull it out of the pile here. Whereas the city of Bothell encompasses the Sammamish River and other waterways, and whereas many Bothell residents of all ages engage in recreational boating and paddling, and whereas the vast majority of serious boating and paddling accidents are caused by a lack of training, human error, or poor judgment, and whereas with the surge of Americans engaging in paddling activities since 2020, many without any training, paddling fatalities now constitute more than 25% of all boating fatalities nationwide. And whereas a significant number of boaters who lose their lives by drowning each year would be alive today if they'd worn their life jackets, and whereas the mission of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary is to promote and improve recreational boating safety by teaching boating safety courses and conducting vessel safety checks. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim May 16th through 22nd, 2026 as Safe Boating and Paddling Week in Bothell, and encourage all community members to learn about and practice safe boating. We have someone here to accept, correct? Awesome. I'll tell you what, meet me up there. Script right there. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm on. Thank you. So Dale Bodica, past Vice Commander for Division 2, which is the Greater Seattle area in the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. So good evening, and thank you for recognizing National Safe Boating and Paddling Week. Also, the great livability provided by the recreational boating opportunities provided by the City of Bothell's miles of shoreline within the city. We come to you with this request at this time every year to remind the residents of the inherent dangers of these activities. And while the air may be warm and warmer, the water is still cold. To prevent incidents and preserve the life, the Coast Guard has established minimum carriage requirements on all vessels, including paddlecraft. The most important of which is the life jacket, which is required for every person on board and every person that may be towed. I would ask that the council take a look at what other cities have done in the area in regards to mandatory wear of life jackets. I think the city of Kenmore and Lake Forest Park has now got an ordinance that requires life jacket wear in the northern part of Lake Washington and the lower extremities of the Sammamish River. Okay, I would also like to highlight the requirement to carry a sound-producing device on all vessels, including paddlecraft. This can be accomplished by simply attaching a whistle to your life jacket, which can be used to prevent collision and also to summon help if you need it. Our efforts in the past decades to educate boaters on safe boating practices and the requirement of a boater education card for motorized vessels has fortunately driven the numbers down. But however, as you indicated earlier, the recent increase in uneducated paddlecraft operators has resulted in a continuance of our unacceptable numbers of deaths and injuries and property damage throughout the state of Washington. Hopefully the residents of Bothell will hear our message this evening and adopt safe boating operational procedures and enjoy their recreational boating activities. We look forward to continuing our partnering with the City of Bothell to advance water safety activity and boating organizations within the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you want to hang out and get a picture with us later, we'll do that after we do all the proclamations.
Some life jackets if you'd like to wear them.
I'm good, but thank you. Oh, Deputy Mayor's into it.
Definitely wear the life jacket.
All right. If we call a vote, I'm going to end up wearing a life jacket anyway, so I'll wear a life
I
jacket.
move for you to wear a life jacket.
All right. You were not recognized. All right. Next up is Affordable Housing Week. Whereas all people should have access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes within communities that provide opportunity, and whereas the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development defines affordable housing as housing on which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of gross income for housing costs, including utilities, and whereas studies have found that each $100 increase in median rent results in a 15% increase in homelessness in metro areas and a 39% increase in homelessness in suburbs and rural areas. And whereas united to raise public awareness, people, organizations, and communities throughout King and Snohomish counties are participating in local Affordable Housing Week activities to elevate the critical need to create healthy communities with ample affordable housing. And whereas the City of Bothell is proud to partner with and support current and future community partners on the development of affordable housing in Bothell, helping to expand access to safe, stable homes for residents in our community. And whereas the City of Bothell endorses the goals, objectives, and purposes of Affordable Housing Week, and in doing so, firmly recommits itself to ensuring that all people in Bothell live with dignity in safe, healthy, and affordable homes. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim the week of May 12th through 16th, 2026 as Affordable Housing Week in Bothell and commit to actions and efforts towards stable and sustainable housing solutions for our community. And we have representatives from Imagine Housing and HASCO here to expect if you come up there. And thank you. And feel free to introduce yourself and say a few words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's a fantastic opportunity to celebrate the needs of our community and support those who desperately need affordable housing. Thank you so much for this proclamation and inviting us to speak here today. My name is Lori Olson. I am the CEO of the Housing Authority of Snohomish County. We don't represent all of your city because, of course, we represent Snohomish County, but we're really happy to be here with you today. HASCO serves as a pass-through for the federal voucher program. We support over 4,000 households that live throughout the county, including Bothell. We also own and operate 2,700 apartments that remain affordable for residents up to 80% of the area median income. As you know, housing affordability is a challenge where most folks need to earn at least $200,000 in order to buy a home. Rent has gone up 50% since 2014, and incomes continue to not rise at that same level. We need to change the story on affordability for our community, and cities like yours taking action like this really does highlight and improve our opportunity to do just that. I want to talk about HASCO. We're doing several things this year. In February, we purchased a building called the Allegro. This is a purchase that allows 240 apartments near a future light rail station at 164th and Nash Way. In addition, we have 2 new construction projects coming online this year, including one in the city of Linwood, 120 apartments, and then we have one in the city of Marysville breaking ground next month. In addition, we're also helping Habitat for Humanity launch their first new construction affordable homeownership project in about 12 years. So there'll be 8 cottages in the city of Linwood. So if you have any surplus land that you'd like to share with the Habitat for Humanity, we'd be happy to chat. We're doing a lot to create affordability in our region, and we're just grateful to be here with you today. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Troy Draws with Imagine Housing. Wanted to say thank you so much for including us in this affordable housing proclamation. We value the city as a valuable partner in the work that we do, and we're very excited that later this summer we'll be opening our first affordable housing development here in Bothell, just down the street, called Sama Senior Apartments. We're almost there, just about ready to cross the finish line. So thank you again for being such a great supportive city to do this kind of work in your jurisdiction, and we look forward to doing many more projects with you.
Hello, I don't know if you were aware that there were 4 of us here to accept the proclamation, so Anon said we could be here. So thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members and city staff for recognizing the need and continuing to do the work to create opportunities for housing that is affordable to people with low incomes. I'm Reverend Kristen Joyner, and I'm leader of the Bothell Urban Project. Due to the land contribution from the city of Bothell and a partnership with Bridge Housing that will bring exciting affordable housing to the city of Bothell. Your work to create incentives and your very practical and productive partnership with Bothell United Methodist Church and Bridge Housing shows true leadership in our region. Growth is going to happen because we live in a beautiful place. Continued attention and careful planning that balances all the needs that arise is tough work. And it takes people that see the long-term benefits of diverse housing choices alongside the immediate and real impacts of the current residents. So this work that's done well strengthens our community, and that is something that our team greatly values. The Bothell Urban Project that includes affordable housing is a great example of how affordable housing doesn't just benefit the residents who live there, it supports local employers, schools, and neighborhoods. In Bothell Urban's case, with construction anticipated to begin in early '27, we will bring an amazing community space, bless you, with new food and beverage options and human services to the people who are in Bothell for a day or a lifetime, something we couldn't have done without the affordable housing portion of the project. And I'm aware of efforts to bring IDD housing and housing with Habitat for Humanity to downtown Bothell, and I'm super excited for that, and I hope for all of us that this comes to fruition. Our hope for Affordable Housing Week is that people take the time to go to the webinars and events that are brought to us by the Housing Development Consortium and North Urban Human Services Alliance, and we thank you for your support.
Good evening. You get one more Affordable Housing Week proclamation recipient here, but my name is Sophie Glass, and I'm with ARCH, which stands for Regional Coalition for Housing. As many of you know, ARCH brings together 15 cities and King County. The 15 cities are across East King County to have a shared mission to build more affordable housing faster. And through pooled resources, ARCH has built about 6 affordable housing developments within Bothell, and we continue to steward a number of other units that you all have created through your programs, affordable housing programs. We're very excited to be one of the contributors to the Bothell Urban Program, project, which you just heard about a moment ago, which is really an exemplary project of how community and cities can work together. So a lot of great progress is being made in the city of Bothell, but we recognize that there are 11,000 people on ARCH's mailing list who are just standing by for their affordable apartment or their first affordable home ownership unit. And so we have a lot to work to do. But I think I'm a real believer in ARCH and the power of collaboration, and I want to thank you all for joining ARCH back in 1995. And so for 31 years, if my math is right, you all have been a tremendous partner, and I've enjoyed getting to know some of the elected officials on your council recently, and I know that Kyle has been a huge asset in our executive board for years. So thank you for being part of a regional solution to our regional affordable housing crisis, and it's a pleasure to be here to celebrate this week.
All right, next up we have one for Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is our last one, in case you were wondering and about to present and wondering when you can go home. Whereas May is designated as Mental Health Awareness Month to raise public awareness, reduce stigma, and promote understanding of mental health issues, and whereas in Washington state, approximately 300,000 adults experience serious mental illness each year, and nearly half of all adults have reported symptoms of anxiety or depression. And whereas 15% of youth in Washington have suffered adverse childhood experiences which are linked to mental health illness and substance misuse in adulthood. And whereas mental health conditions are common and treatable, yet access to care remains a challenge with only 44% of Washingtonians with a serious form of mental illness receiving treatment. And whereas mental health challenges disproportionately affect historically marginalized communities, including people of color, LGBTQIA+ people, and low-income populations, who often face additional barriers to accessing culturally competent mental health care. And whereas the City of Bothell is proud to partner with community organizations, including the North Shore YMCA, to expand access to free mental health services for Bothell residents and reduce barriers that can prevent individuals and families from receiving the care and support they need. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim May 2026 as Mental Health Awareness Month in Bothell, joining advocates and communities across the country in promoting mental health awareness and supporting those affected by mental health conditions. And I believe we have the North Shore YMCA team here. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Donnie Goodman. I'm the Executive Director over the Behavioral Health Programs for the YMCA of Greater Seattle's Social Impact Center. Try putting that on a business card. First of all, let me just briefly tell you about the Social Impact Center. We are the second largest social services of the Ys in the United States. And we always think of Ys of the swim and gyms branches, as we call them. Well, in addition, we have 3 programs that make up our social services. One is foster care. We're one of the most robust placements for foster care in the state, and we're very proud of the fact that we provide additional support to families once they agree to be a foster parent. We're the largest housing of 18 to 24-year-olds in the state who are homeless or struggling with consistent and supportive housing. And we run shelters. And then the third program, which I oversee, is the Behavioral Health Services. It's made up of 4 different programs. The Outpatient Behavioral Health, which is the traditional mental health and addiction services. We're based in various branches, schools, and community centers. We have what formerly known as CORES, Children's Crisis Outreach Response Services. We're the one and only agency in the county that carries this 24/7. We respond to 18 and younger individuals and families, or 19 to 24-year-old youth in homeless shelters. Either case, we respond with a group of 3 people that provide behavioral health immediately, and as well as parent and youth support. And of course, I'm very proud of, we have just graduated, the first 48 students in a free master's program we started 2 years ago to increase the diversity and representation of behavioral health individuals. As a gay Native American, I know what it's like not to have people look at me or be like me across from me sitting in therapy. And so our goal is to expand that. And then I'm here tonight, a nod, I really want to recognize, because he invited a while back with the opioid award monies, Bothell reached out about, hey, what are the things we can do for our community? And I was invited to one of your community meetings, the daytime ones with different social services and agencies from Bothell. And right away, I'm like, why do I not live here? To have providers, council members, politicians to truly care about their constituents is so, I was emotionally moved that day, still am, especially in the times that we're in right now. And so I just want to extend my greatest gratitude with that. And so what we have done, because of your guys' support, and really want to enhance, we, if you've been to the North Shore Y, you might have noticed, we call it the greenhouse. There's a house, it was, I guess, a daycare at one time. Prior to that was truly somebody's home. And we are currently remodeling that. We are putting mental health therapy rooms, group rooms in there, and as well as we are locating one of our 6 CORES teams will be stationed there. So a year ago, CORES was revamped to meet a new model of services, and we are expanded to have, instead of one office at 2100 downtown Seattle where people go out for the emergency response, we have 6 offices, Bothell being one of them. And so they're currently in the Y as we're remodeling. And so it's really a great honor, and we're able to do this because of the care and compassion all of you have done, and a nod in your team. So it's really humbling to receive this, so thank you.
Thank you. Hey, the next time people from the YMCA come, can we get like a Village People theme, like music going over the thing? It seems like it'd be fun. All right, next up is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-ups for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We received a comment from Bart Flora, who wrote in regarding the multifamily tax exemption and development challenges for building affordable housing, which was forwarded to council. And council received comment from Natalie Reber on behalf of the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish Counties regarding proposed mandatory affordable housing requirements. That was it for written comment. I do not have anyone signed up to speak, but anyone in the audience that wishes to, can you please raise your hand? And anyone, any remote attendees, please raise your virtual hand. I'm not seeing anyone.
Thank you so much. All right, next up is reports, and we're going to start with the city manager reports, and we have presentations under that agenda item.
Yeah, quite a few tonight, so I'll keep my additional comments brief, but I did want to just close the loop with one thing from last week with council. During your meeting, you authorized me to complete a transaction to purchase the property at 10015 Main Street, the former Gallo de Oro site. I'm pleased to report that as of 3 o'clock, that transaction is completed, recorded with the county, and it is now in city control. And again, we'll continue working on additional property acquisition in downtown with an update to council on June 2nd. Next up then in the first report, you'll see on your agenda, there was a placeholder for a discussion of a draft agenda for a joint meeting between the Bothell City Council and the Shoreline Fire Department, RFA, Board of Commissioners. And we've been working hard to poll and try and align calendars for 17 elected officials, which is no small feat. We haven't hit perfect attendance, but we hit critical mass. And so the proposed date and time would be next Monday, May 18th, starting at 5:30. And we will be hosting here at Bothell City Hall. We'll make the table just a little bit larger for everyone to participate. Earlier this afternoon, I sent an email with a draft agenda as well as a copy of discussion items that staff have been working through as we discuss the nuances of what would it look like to move forward with joining the Shoreline Fire Department RFA. I also wanted to share that before opening it up for any feedback, that Chief Cowan and I both walked into our meeting last Thursday to start discussing this joint meeting with the sense that it would be helpful to find somebody to facilitate the meeting so that all participants were able to participate. And so we're poised to be joined by Bruce Granowski, who would be facilitating that meeting. He has done work with Shoreline Fire before through their conversations with the North Shore Fire District. And I did meet with him today and seems very well suited for the task and was able to reflect on the agenda as well. So what I wanted to note is that the agenda that's before you essentially has 4 parts: introductions, brief background, and then the heart of the meeting would be in discussion items to talk about service level considerations, which Chief Cowan would lead, discuss the proposed plan of governance, of which there will be draft language for both sides to consider, as well as finance discussions. There's a number of things in the attached document about discussion items that staff are working through that are financial related, but in the interest of time of not being here for 6 hours or plus, what Bruce had suggested was if we start with a top 3, and I think I merged together 4 topics for the financial discussions to focus on, but your packet would also have answers to all the remaining questions too, so there'd be opportunity for Q&A if there were details that you wanted to know more information on. But before finalizing this, and based on the feedback from last week of at least wanting to have some touch, I wanted to update you on what was planned, see if there's anything missing, and then otherwise we will be prepared to publish an agenda for next Monday. With that, I'll pause if there's any questions or feedback.
Question? Yeah. So, City Manager, thanks for this. This looks really great. It looks like an aggressive agenda, and I know we've got what I call like two law firms coming together. And it feels like there are going to be 60 people in one room, and thankfully we have a facilitator. Is it realistic that we're going to get through all of these agenda items? Here's where I'm having pause. It's the financial discussion that feels like the deepest dive, and I want to make sure that we get to everything. Is there sort of a plan B if we do not get to all of it?
Thank you. No, and we'll be sure to prioritize, and perhaps even the flow of it was we were thinking that the first two are higher level questions that I think both elected bodies are interested in, but I think the written answer should be fairly informative, but all of it leads up to then what is the impact to Bothell voters. So we'll try and spend the most time there, but point well taken. Even if we have of the potential 17, even if we had 12 there, if everybody speaks twice, that's a meeting right there. So understood.
Sure. Robert's Rules of Order. And my last question would be, what should we take away as the net takeaway? What would be next steps after this?
Yeah, so our facilitator will follow up to listen for things. There will be no decisions made in this meeting, but it is intended to put clarity on the table for both parties to make a decision on whether or not you are interested in moving forward. As mentioned last week, we would then, at a future meeting here at the Bothell City Council, you'd have a resolution before you to consider, do we want to send notification to the Shoreline RFA board of an intent or interest in joining. So I think that conversation is where then the things that you learned at this joint meeting next week would help inform then of whether or not you have what you're looking for to make a decision, yes or no, do you want to join?
Okay, thank you. You've answered all my questions.
Thank you.
I think this pretty accurately summarizes what we cared about the most and what we want to talk about. So I'm good with it and appreciate this.
All right. Well, thank you all for the consideration and the tight turnarounds. We're seeing this come together pretty quickly. The next report then before you, we do have a presentation from King County Metro staff. So I'm going to invite first, though, our very own Steve Morikawa, Deputy Director of Public Works, here to introduce staff members. We're joined by staff here online and in person. As council may remember, last July, for 5 of you, you were part of sending a letter to King County expressing your support for continuing the Metroflex program in Bothell. By way of background, as a reminder, we had been alerted by our neighboring jurisdiction in Kirkland that there was changes being considered based on ridership, and we brought this forward to council, in which you then expressed the importance of, boy, we have some BRT coming, and let's keep the program in our neighborhood in order to see what that influence will have. So again, Metroflex is considered a pilot in the Bothell area right now, and while the original area was underperforming, we're thankful that the boundaries were at least adjusted and not that this didn't go away. And to hear more about it tonight, I'm going to turn things over to Steve to introduce King County staff, who we're thankful to have join us.
So good evening, Mayor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Aldorks, and council members. Tonight we have King County Metro staff here to give you a short brief and also be available to answer questions on recent modifications to the Metroflex area serving Bothell, like City Manager mentioned. Providing efficient, effective transit service is a very complex thing, made more difficult with the always present funding limitations. And in this case, the pilot area serving Bothell was not performing well, and King County had to make some hard decisions. So I want to thank staff for continuously being open and to listening to our input and working hard to see if modifications could be found to make give the pilot the best chance to succeed. So tonight we have 3 staff members. There's Amanda Pleasant-Brown, Local Policy and Government Affairs Lead, Meredith Sampson, Transportation Planner, and sitting in the back is Genevieve Jones, Government Relations Administrator for North and East King County.
Thank you so very much, and big shout out to Bothell staff as well, past and present, who were really wonderful in the conversations and really appreciate the continued conversations we had. So thank you so much for that work. So yeah, like Steve said, I'm Amanda Pleasant-Brown, she, they pronouns. I do government relations for King County Metro, working with our 39 cities. We're really excited to be here to talk with you tonight about the adjustments to the Metroflex boundaries. Please let us know your questions. Work for me. There we go.
Here's our agenda tonight. So we're going to give you a quick overview of the program just so that you're aware of it. We'll go over what adjustments we made and the why, and then we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A. But we're going to be a little tight tonight, I know.
Hi, everybody. Meredith Sampson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a transportation planner for Metro. I can give a quick overview of Metroflex. So Metroflex augments the fixed route transit network in King County by reaching areas of lower demand with less fixed route transit coverage, bridging connections between community destinations and local transit hubs. We currently serve 10 service areas across the county. So if any of you have used Metroflex, you may know this, but Metroflex is open to the general public. You can request a ride on demand using the app or through our call center or through web booking. You provide a start or end location anywhere within the service area. You get an ETA. You walk to a nearby pickup location, usually the nearest intersection, and you join a shared ride, potentially shared ride, within a 15-minute ETA on average. It's the same fare as a bus, free transfers with Orca, youth ride free. Same rules apply as all Orca cards. Okay, so now I can go over kind of the adjustments to the service areas that affect Bothell. So we're talking about the former Juanita service area and the North Shore pilot service area. So this slide shows the performance of both service areas from April to December 2025. And this performance is really the impetus for us making these changes. We track quite a few different metrics across our service areas. Some of them are to track service quality, like wait times or percent of time riders get a notice that there's no seat available. Other metrics feed directly into our evaluation, like cost per ride, rides per hour, and really get at, are we using our resources efficiently? And in a way that aligns with Metro's goals for the program. So for reference, the rides per vehicle hour here, in our last evaluation, the service areas that passed had about 2.1 rides per vehicle hour. So both of these service areas were underperforming. We saw that they likely would not pass our evaluation. So seeing this, we thought we could probably make a change that would help these service areas serve more riders. Since launching Metroflex, we have learned a lot about where these types of services perform well. We've tried it in a lot of different areas across King County. And so I can kind of get into those on the next slide, but we use these best practices to inform our decision-making and changes for the service areas. So some of these best practices are population density and destination density near each other drive productivity. So if you have an area with a certain level of residential density and businesses that are close by to each other, it makes for shorter rides, it increases ridership, and when I say productivity, I mean rides per hour, so it just gets that rides per hour number up. Having a transit hub in the service area that is served by frequent routes drives ridership across all of our service areas. Transit hubs are the #1 location that riders are traveling to. Centering these destinations like transit hubs within a service area can help to increase efficiency, so shorter trips. If the hubs are on the outskirts of the service area, it creates longer trips, the vehicles are in use for a longer time, so it decreases that rides per hour number. And lastly, taking the street network into account is really important. Something might look really close on a map, but you know that driving there could take a lot longer than it might look. So it is a vehicle, so we do have to take the street network into account there. So this slide shows the adjusted Juanita and Totem Lake pilot service area. So the gray outline is the previous Juanita service area, and the green outline is the new service area. I think you might have missed.
I did.
Yeah. We could do either order, but this one was first. Okay. Backing up, we're going to talk about the North Shore service area. The blue service area is the new North Shore service area, and the gray is the former North Shore service area. So this centers around the Kenmore Park and Ride. This area has a higher population and job density than the previous service area, which was like largely residential through the middle of the service area with the destinations on the outskirts like I talked about. And this also has more destinations and community assets included in this area, including UW Bothell, St. Edward State Park, Bothell and Inglemoor High Schools. So this area brings new coverage of Metroflex to areas of Bothell that were not previously covered, which we're really excited about, and we think will make this service area a lot more productive than the previous one. And the southern portion here of this service area was formerly covered by the Juanita pilot, which I will get into next, but we kind of are switching coverage here. Okay, here is the new Juanita Totem Lake pilot service area centering around the Totem Lake Transit Center. It's a smaller service area. The Juanita service area was very large compared to like across our service areas, which led to much longer trips. This has a higher population density, higher density of destinations and community assets listed here. Schools, high schools, colleges are huge ridership drivers in Metroflex service areas. So we really focused on the areas of North Shore and Juanita that were having the highest ridership so far, and then extending them into areas that we thought would perform better. So to talk about rider communication, we started the rider communication a month out from when we made the change to give riders enough time to understand what was happening, but not too much time where they were confused. So in late March, there were in-app messages released in the in the Metroflex app. There was emails to riders who have used Metroflex in either service area. And then in early April, we had sent a follow-up in-app message, posted a Metro Matters blog post. In mid-April, we updated our website, and then on launch day and afterwards, we did a social media and marketing push and in-vehicle flyers. In addition to these, for people who called in the call center and might not look at their email or have access to the app, like the people in the call center a month out were letting folks know about these changes as well. And lastly, these pilots will last at least 1 year from April 20th. So the North Shore pilot, which now covers Bothell, began in September 2024. So the 2-year mark would be coming up this September, and that's normally when we would evaluate a pilot. Because we're making this major change right now, we will be running this pilot in this new service area for at least a year, and the evaluation takes into account the last 6 months of performance. So we're really hoping that we can get the ridership up and it does well in our performance. And we will also be setting up regular meetings with city staff to kind of review performance every couple months and discuss if we've heard any feedback or if there are any minor changes that need to happen.
And as Meredith is talking about, we work together on this. And so we already shared a communications toolkit, and so please share that. We have video promotions that have gone out, social media, copy, graphics. We even tried to do some YouTube and TikTok ads. And we also have a blog post that we're happy to share as well. And so we're going to continue, as Meredith said, to dedicate staff time to this. It was really helpful when we got the staffs together of Juanita, Kirkland, and Kenmore. When we were trying to save the services, we had a combined communication effort, and we hope to continue that sort of energy so that we can get more people riding the service. And that's the end of our presentation. We're happy to take any questions you have.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the updates. I really appreciate it. I was struck by 2 questions. The first, you mentioned learning about what types of street networks support Metroflex. Are you sharing that with like our community development department and our transportation engineers and the other affected cities so they kind of know what's working when it comes to this sort of service?
Yeah, we certainly can. The Metroflex is operated by minivans. So essentially, if a car can navigate the street, the minivan will also be able to navigate the street. When I'm talking about street networks, we're mostly talking about, if a service area is bisected by a highway and it maybe only has one crossing, like that could lead to a lot longer trip time. So we have to consider, do we want to include that area or not? It could use the vehicles for more time. But yeah, we're coordinating with cities and happy to share any information we learned.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a lot of highways in some of those zones. The other question I had is, if anything, what does the handoff look like between like community transit and Metro? Like if you are using Metroflex and the overall trip crosses the county line, what does that handoff sort of look like? How are people guided through that journey?
So the current North Shore service area as of pre-April 20th, it did cross county lines, and that was it was seamless for riders. We just operated it as one service. They didn't know they were crossing county lines. The new service area is fully within King County.
So I guess when someone is saying I need to get, I'm going to pick something random, I guess, I need to get from the Fred Meyer in Snohomish County to UW Bothell, are they kind of guided through taking a community transit bus and then Metroflex if it's called for? I'm really struggling to come up with a route that would make sense with that, but like how is someone guided through getting across the county line? And it's okay if that's a question that needs to go somewhere else. I'm curious about how riders are engaged with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is boundary. So if folks are within that boundary, then they will be requested, or they can request a Metroflex ride. So you do need to be within the boundary to even request the ride. So as far as the handoff, because it's no longer serving Snohomish County, there wouldn't necessarily be a handoff. We do have fixed route filtering on the service. So if there is a trip that they can complete on a fixed route service or a fixed route bus, that would be better for their trip in general. They will be pulled to that. And so I think that's about where we can get to on answering this question, but if there's more specifics, please let us know, and we work with Steve all the time, so we're happy to follow up.
No, and that totally makes sense if you couldn't use it if you aren't in the boundary.
Yeah.
So, and I live in the Snohomish County part of the city, so I'm not, unless I'm coming from here, I wouldn't, thanks.
Makes sense, thank you.
Councilmember Miles.
Thank you. Great presentation, and I'm super excited about this. I am a former New Yorker and have lived here 30 years without a car. Now I do have one, and I know Metro. Since I moved from Juanita to Bothell, what I've noticed is that there is a dearth of transportation options where I live in North Creek. It's now becoming a little bit more residential. There are office parks there as well. It's mostly car-centric, but I have a teenager right now that can't take the bus. So I was looking forward to this being a service. So I was wondering, is there an opportunity to expand the service area, knowing that there are constraints within the pilot?
I would say at this time, we're not looking to expand the service area for a couple reasons. One is just the Metroflex budget. Like, we have a certain amount of money that provides a certain number of vehicles in the service area, and the larger the service area is, the worse the service quality gets without more funding. And just from a service design standpoint, we don't like to create very large service areas. But that doesn't mean there can't be there's always partnership opportunities on the table, but we would have to look at that from a service design perspective as well.
Understood. And this is something I think is like a longer term conversation and different options that are on the table. It's sort of my own personal mission to get more transportation options there. It just seems like it's the lone 230 bus, and there has to be a little bit more now that it is becoming more residential. So I'm happy to partner with you and have further conversations. Mm-hmm.
And you can come talk to me, because we do have some opportunities potentially with another bus provider. We're kind of in two counties, and that's a good thing and sometimes complex. But yeah, come talk to me, and there's some things we have going on that hopefully will pan out.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Giving me hope.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks for the presentation. I love this program. It's kind of like the Metro's answer to ride hailing. And so one of the experiences that I had with the initial pilot program in the North Shore area was that the area that intersected downtown Bothell also intersected Evergreen Health in Totem Lake. And that was a service that I talked up to a lot of people to get them a connection to the hospital for their appointments. And I have lamented the change in the boundaries now that we're kind of separated out from the other district that contains Evergreen Health. And thinking about resources for riders who are looking for that sort of flexibility to get from their door to an appointment, I asked Metro, and they said, oh, we have this Hyde shuttle service, check with that. Like, Bothell's the only area in King County that doesn't have Hyde shuttle. So are there other resources that you would point people to cross between these service areas now that our areas sort of shifted? Do you have any ideas? Or if you don't have any on the top of your head, I know you didn't prepare for that. So I'd love to hear more ways that we can connect folks to resources to get around. And I know there's a lot of different requirements and eligibility requirements and so forth. So that sort of helpful resource could be shared more broadly. We get a lot of folks coming to us as council members with a problem with transportation, and they're looking for a solution, and we are long-term thinkers up here. So it's really helpful to connect them to resources at Metro.
Yeah, those types of desired connections are something we definitely want to hear about with these services as we're working to refine them. I have a couple ideas of connections, but without my map in front of me, I can't say for sure, and I don't want to be on the record saying something incorrect, so I'll have to follow up about those options, but always appreciate the feedback for those kinds of connections.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this presentation. Great job on timing and pacing. I know you were worried about that, but it's really exciting to see that. Everyone up here has different experiences of depending on where we live in the city. And so previously my story was that my neighborhood was not included within the service area, and it is now, which means that my kid who goes to Lake Washington Tech and gets a bus to the Kenmore Park and Ride could now benefit from the service. And that is an excellent improvement for my little pocket of the city. And so I think what my colleagues are saying up here is that we all are looking to these programs to meet the needs of our communities and our neighborhoods. And so it can be awkward and uncomfortable to be like, hey, it was better for you now, and now it's better for us. And so I recognize some of the strain and effort that goes into trying to create something that works for as many people as possible. And so while I understand, some of the logic and reasoning that went into these changes and appreciate the improvements, I guess I'm wondering, and I'm also observing you being open to feedback as well. And so what is the best way for people to communicate their desired paths and corridors that are beneficial to their community? And where do we put that feedback to you, through a public process?
Really appreciate that. And there are lots of ways which we receive feedback. So I think our customer service is one intake place. So that's 206-553-3000. So folks can always call that and provide feedback, especially we have the East Link Connections network that's getting implemented. And so if folks have feedback, we have already alerted our customer service folks hey, you might be getting some feedback about people's changes in routes. Please be aware that gets passed on to our service planning, service development team. We also we'll have some projects coming up. And so I know that we've got some policy updates that are coming up next year. We'll also have some restructure projects that are going to be coming up around the new Rapid Ride K line that's going to be happening in a couple of years. So we really are, and just know that here at Metro, we've been really trying to improve our communication and connections with cities and partnerships. And so we've been trying to do better in just letting folks know and letting city staff know and have more regular conversations about what's coming up so that we can also prepare and city staff can prepare their resources with the limited resources that folks have to participate in those processes. And oftentimes those do have a community engagement element. If you hear things from your public comment, please always feel free to pass those on. Again, we talk to your city staff. You all have connections to us. Metro literally hired me so that we can make sure that we could have better relationships. Other ways that we can hear from folks. I think those are the ones off the top of my head. So just, I would subscribe to our updates. If we've got projects that are coming out, please subscribe to our blog. We try to let jurisdictional staff know what's coming up. We're trying to do also a quarterly newsletter so that folks know other ways that they can participate. But those other things, please do contact our customer service. We do read all of those comments. We sort them. They go to our planners, and then Meredith herself will read them and then see how we can meet a need if we can.
I would like to pledge that I will subscribe to your newsletter. Yay. And when there are projects that are relevant to our community, I will put them in my newsletter that will go out to Bothell residents.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And please do include the Metroflex info.
Oh, yeah, I would love to.
Yes,
would love to. Okay.
We really do want to see ridership grow.
Councilmember Anguilari.
Great presentation, great initiative. Nowadays, owning a car is expensive, so I think now light rail and with all this, I think a lot of people can afford to go around easily. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for continuing this. I know the ridership was down and we sent a letter, and I see you being responsive, and just please know that's appreciated. We really appreciate you coming out here. We really appreciate kind of getting another bite at the apple on this, and hopefully our comms team has the comms toolkit and we can communicate it out as best we can. We have a new comms team this year, so we're doing a little better than we used to. So we'll do our best to amplify that message as well, and just really appreciate y'all coming out here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your partnership. Thanks for the time this evening. Bye.
Thanks.
All right, council, turning to the third presentation tonight, and we'll still get to hear from Steve, I believe. I've been attending council meetings since 2015 now, and there's two things that I'm reminded of tonight that I don't get to pull out very often. Number one is that May is Safe Boating and Paddling Week. I've been hearing about it now for over a decade, and it's ingrained in me. The second is that there's an endless treadmill relationship between the Capital Facilities Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, that is due by July 1st if we want to stay grant eligible. I've been hearing about that annually for over a decade too. So tonight you're going to hear about it and hopefully can explain it to your friends at cocktail parties. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Steve Morikawa, the Deputy.
We love
Deputy Director of Public
plans
Works.
so much. We have plans on plans, plans of plans.
Stack them up.
Yeah.
And I'll turn it over to Steve to put it in context and tell you what to expect.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening again. So the goal of this briefing is to introduce you to the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. We also call it the TIP or TIP. There's no action tonight. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah. I'll briefly cover what it is, why we need one, how it's developed, and how it's related to the Capital Facility Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. What the process will be to adopt it, and then try to answer any questions that you have. So the 6-year TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan program, is a list of transportation projects and programs that the city will work on over the next 6 years. For this cycle, it's 2027 through 2032. It's required by the Revised Code of Washington, Section 3577010. It must be submitted at least one time annually and by July 1st to the state. A public hearing is also required prior to approval, and you, the council, must be the approving body to approve it. We could actually update this as many times as you want per year, but you would have to go through the same process. One of the important reasons why we want to do this and meet this requirement is also because projects that we go after for grants, the grant agencies often require the projects to be on this 6-year TIP. So in Bothell, we develop and approve a capital facilities plan. We call it a CFP every 2 years along with the budget. This is the year that we do that. It includes all capital projects, so transportation projects, utility projects, facility projects, parks projects. And this works out well since we can update the CFP while considering the entire budget rather than, and all the capital needs, rather than just looking at the transportation needs all by themselves. So the 6-year TIP is essentially the transportation section of the capital facility plan. And you'll notice that the capital facility plan is 7 years, and it's done every 2 years, and the TIP is 6 years and done every 1 year. So they kind of balance each other on that second year, if that makes sense. And transportation projects in the capital facility plan, and therefore in the transportation improvement plan, they come from the 20-year list of transportation projects that were adopted in the comprehensive plan. And if you're looking for that, the list is in the transportation element. So the process, it's kind of interesting because in odd years, since the CFP has been adopted later in the year, usually like November or December, the TIP that following year basically just matches or mirrors what that CFP approval was. In even years like this year, the TIP actually kind of predates the CFP. We're kind of working on the draft CFP right now. So what you will see is essentially matching the draft CFP that you will see. Now, if we go through the capital facility plan process and there are some changes made, then the following year we will make the TIP match that again. So the next step, we're just holding the briefing tonight, would be a public hearing, and that would be on June 2nd. Again, that's a requirement, and that's where I'll actually present the list to you folks. And then the following would be June 16, which would be probably on consent if everything goes well, would be to adopt it. And that would give us time to submit it by the July 1st deadline. And again, there's no action tonight. I just wanted to kind of introduce you to what the 6-year TIP was, let you know what the process will be, and then I'll be back in early June to kind of go through it in more detail. And with that, if there's any questions, I would be happy to entertain them. Let's go back a little bit.
It doesn't look like there are any questions, but thank you for bringing this. We all did the capital facilities plan, so we've been through this list, and we need to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, last presentation tonight is an update on the city's Pop Shop program. That would be Pop Shop program. We're joined tonight by our Deputy City Manager, Claire Corey, and Economic Development Coordinator, Ashish Joshi. Essentially, tonight's update is about the completion of the third cohort program. So it's a 2-year cycle. And in your packet is some audio testimonials. And we're also joined by some of our graduates as well tonight. So we're excited to have them here, thankful for their participation in the program, and looking forward to hearing about the program and what's coming next. So with that, I'll turn things over to Claire.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Alderks, and Bothell City Council. Ashish and I are here this evening to provide an update on the Pop Shops. So there is no action this evening. It is just a briefing on the overall Pop Shops program. And this is just a reminder that last week we were with you and you approved the City Council Vision 2040. And as you're all aware, one of the vision areas in that document is focused on economic vitality. And one of the important priorities that's listed under that vision area is the Economic Vitality Plan. And that was launched last year at about this time. And one of the major elements that's included in that plan is supporting small businesses and small business incubators. And this project is a really important part of that plan and that theme. And with that, I will turn it over to Ashish, and Ashish is going to dive into the details for you.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. As you see here, a key part of economic vitality is business growth. And one way to measure business growth is through GDP, which is gross domestic product, or the production of goods and services. Taking a look at our region, you can see that more than 45% of our GDP is produced by our small businesses, and this is measured through payroll and workforce. But it outlines that the way to support those small businesses. And one of those methods is an incubator. And an incubator is a program where you provide starter space for a limited time. In our case, it's 2 years. At reduced cost to a small business so that they can start to experiment and grow and build that strength. Our incubator started in 2021 with a partnership with the city and the Port of Seattle, and working to build 4 6-foot by 8-foot sheds and turning them into spaces for a small business to begin to grow in. Since then, we've worked on several cohorts. We've gone through 3 major cohorts, and the third cohort is graduating this spring and is joining us today. As you can see, the first 2 cohorts, we had a lot of learnings through that process, a couple early exits, a couple additions in the middle of them. And so we've taken those lessons from the third cohort. One thing we wanted to do is make sure that they have additional education and structure so that they can make it through the whole 2 years. And pleased to say that 3 of them were able to do that and joining us today. We take that going forward as well to the 4th cohort that we started last year. That included the construction of 4 additional pop shops as well, and continue those lessons in the 5th cohort that is currently in progress, and also our first mobile food version of that. So there's a mirrored program joining us at Triangle Junction. So a handful of metrics define success in a program like this and success for a business in general. You can see here a couple, and in your packet as well, and then there are the qualitative elements through the testimonials that are accompanying the packet as well. Here, you can see that revenue is a challenge, despite being in the heart of downtown. There is that paradox of meeting supply and demand at the same time. And we see that in many elements as we continue to bring vibrancy to downtown and other districts. Well, from a business perspective, though, the key things that they can control is finding a way to build a following and connect to the market. Connecting with those learning experiences is a key part of this program. And one area is engaging with those learning opportunities. For example, one of our businesses was in the region's first ever small business accelerator cohort, which is a learning program over 15 weeks. And they were one of 2 businesses within 6 cities in our region that got high notes of going through the program and being a high performer in that program. So that was one example. Another one is the partnerships that the businesses can make. And our businesses have made several partnerships. A couple examples are just working with other local businesses as well as regional businesses. One of our pop shops, as part of this cohort, you can actually see their product in a business down the street, as well as at the airport. Their product was right near Terminal C at the concourse until a few months ago. And then ultimately, we want them to also engage in learning to find their market. So a couple of our businesses looked into distribution, for example, and connected to resources and learning opportunities at the state with its free advising, as well as attending local markets and the trade shows. So, for example, there is a local chocolate festival, and the learnings and connections there are invaluable, so that the fact that they went out and connected with those helped. So as we continue this program, we want to learn from our peer organizations, whether it's regional, whether it's national, and take some lessons from there to build more structure and more support so that these businesses can be in a better place at the end. A couple lessons that we took from some other peers are scale matters. So having more businesses go through a program is a key element of success, as well as identifying that pipeline for the next step. So commercial space is a big area that this program tries to cover, but it's a few steps there. So there's a big area to be able to get a commercial space just due to cost, due to size, and due to learning. So continue to reduce that gap. And we continue to learn and implement that through future iterations of the program, but also with partnerships. So we are partnering with the campus, the graduate program at the School of Business, to take a holistic look at the program and figure out where we can provide more support, where we can adjust our approach to continue the program in the future. And then a bigger part is that we want to make sure it aligns with the Vitality Plan. So this program predated the Vitality Plan, but it is directly aligning with several actions in the Vitality Plan, and ultimately serving that goal of supporting these many small businesses that you can see on our polka dot map on the right. And then simultaneously with all that work, we want to launch additional cohorts. So we're launching the current cohort this summer. Once again, as a reminder, no action is needed, and happy to answer questions with a special thanks to our businesses in the audience as well, who helped us learn just as they learned through the program. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this update. I've been very excited to watch the development of this program since it was introduced, and to see it expand and get new people in has been really exciting. I recall, I think maybe with the second cohort, there was like a graduation celebration. Is that happening for the third cohort?
We did have a graduation celebration. We have these monthly meetings to check in, and as they connected with the new cohort, they had a graduation celebration.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, I just want to congratulate the folks who participated, and I hope that it was a successful and just fruitful opportunity to learn and connect with our community. I know that community members feel really drawn to that space in that area, and thank you for the work that you've done. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear this update. Thank you.
I too was glad to hear the update. I'm excited to see who is coming into the next program and see what else we're going to have down there, and really excited to see us. Obviously the space has been upgraded, and really excited to see, hopefully, especially in the summertime, more people going there and hanging out, and food trucks, and just make it a cool place to be. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you, Mayor. That completes the city manager report tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next up is council reports and conversations. Council members. Councilmember Dodd?
Yes, I have. I've been trying to remember to say this. Councilmember Curd, the Senior Center Transportation Program would go from Bothell to Evergreen Health, but it's not on-demand rides. So the other thing that's fascinating to me is transitioning folks between specialized transportation providers. Like when someone crosses a county line, like the systems are not the same, and there's like a lot of weird extra manual work that the transportation providers have to do it. I don't have any thoughts there other than it sucks. And if anybody ever hears of work being done to try and normalize that, that would be great. But there's a lot of room there for more last minute rides. I think it's hard for a lot of people to plan that far ahead to request a ride days in advance, especially if you suddenly have to go to the doctor.
Deputy Mayor.
I've got an update on the Human Services Committee. Was that really yesterday? Yeah, we met yesterday. And it was a good overview of funding and the grant opportunities, and just really fantastic to hear about the work of how our community has come together to look out for our immigrant neighbors. And so I really enjoyed being on that committee, grateful to be on it with Councilmember Dodd and Councilmember Miles. And we heard some really great updates that I'm sure will come to the whole council soon, but wanted to let you know that we met and things seem to be moving forward well.
All right, I'm going to move on to projected agenda discussion and kick it over to the Deputy Mayor about the Disability Pride Flag.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Fascinating. I'm really grateful for the staff putting this memorandum together and bringing this forward to councils for our consideration. The Disability Pride Flag is really recognizes the whole gamut and diversity of disability that exists within humans. And so there is a photo of it in your packet, so it's available to the public and also to council members. And so every stripe on this flag represents a different type of disability. So I'll just read through them. Sensory disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, invisible disabilities, cognitive and intellectual disabilities, and physical disabilities. It's against a gray background, which has its own, black background, which represents mourning the lives that have been lost to systemic ableism, disability-fueled violence, abuse, and negligence. And as, this is personally meaningful to me, but I also like to remember that all of us experience some form of disability at some point in our lives. Like none of us are free from, the effects of mortality and having bodies that can fail in a massive variety of ways. And so I think it's very meaningful for us to be able to recognize Disability Pride Month in the month of July. And I would very much like to see it displayed to recognize and honor all of us and all of those that we love with disabilities in our community. And so my question to you is, would you like to do this?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes, and I will remind everyone, should you need it, that Bothell's location near Seattle Children's in the North Shore School District, which has led a lot of great programs over time for access with students with disabilities, and just how close we are to services, having Kindering and Child's Drive. We attract a lot of families with a lot of kids and adults with different disabilities, whether they be physical or intellectual, and we should support them. I think this is a great idea, and I thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing it forward.
And Mayor, with 3 council members expressing interest, you can keep the ball rolling if more people want to speak to, but we do have enough now that I will make sure this gets added on a future agenda, similar to how tonight the LGBTQIA+ flag is being approved per our flag policy. We'll prepare an agenda bill with the resolution to direct staff to raise this flag in the month of July. But again, if there's more discussion, please continue. I just wanted to clarify, though, we have what we need.
I was just going to say, name your color. I'm gold. All right. If anybody else has something to say, you're welcome to. All right, and lacking that, I would love to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Dodd.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alcaro. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yes or no. Councilmember Aguilar.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alderks.
Yes.
Councilmember Curd.
Yes.
Councilmember Miles.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd.
Yes.
Councilmember Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. All right, it is 7:16. We are going to adjourn to executive session to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I with action expected under item 11A for 15 minutes. Council will return from executive session or adjourn from executive session or return here at 7:31. We'll see you in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. It is 7:31. Next up on our agenda is ordinances and resolutions. Agenda Bill 26078, WSDOT Local Agency Agreement for the 102nd Avenue Northeast Bridge Planning Study. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 items under ordinances and resolutions tonight, and as you mentioned, this first one does have to do with the 102nd Avenue Bridge. We are joined tonight by Christopher Stillwell, the capital project engineer managing the 102nd Avenue Northeast Bridge Replacement Project, and we'll turn it over to staff to walk you through.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. As stated, I'm Christopher Stillwell. I'm the engineer managing the replacement study, and this is going to be similar to the presentation we discussed in February. Our hope tonight is that you will approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a local agency agreement with WSDOT for the 102nd Avenue Northeast Bridge Planning Study, obligating just over $1 million in grant funds and committing the required local matching funds. I'll do a quick overview, touch on the timeline, and then there'll be time for some questions as well. So just briefly, the intent of the project is to conduct a type, size, and location study with community outreach and cost and feasibility analysis. We received FHWA funds that will be administered or passed through WSDOT, which requires the city to enter into a local agency agreement with WSDOT, which will enable us to use the funds. In February, the city applied for the grant of February 2024. The city applied for the grant. We were awarded the grant in August of 2024. And then throughout 25 and 26, the city joined other local governments in challenging certain federal grant conditions. specifically King County versus Turner and California v. Duffy. In February of this year, we came to you with the grant agreement with the FHWA, which you approved. We're here now in May, hoping for approval of the WSDOT local agency agreement. And if approved, we intend to start the project as soon as possible, no later than Q4 of this year. That's it for me.
Councilmember Curd.
Thank you for the presentation. Exciting to get started on this project, and I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a local agency agreement with WSDOT for the 102nd Avenue Northeast Bridge planning study to obligate $1.08 million in grant funds.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd and a second from Councilmember Dodd. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Alcabra. Please speak to the motion.
I've been quiet. Last time when we had this, I actually voted no because of the terms and conditions imposed on us. But I feel like we, as a council, we decided to move forward, and it makes sense for us to move forward in this very important piece of infrastructure. So, just wanted to, for the record.
Thank you. Councilmember Dodd.
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you, Councilmember Alcabra. You brought up very good points the last time that we talked about this, and I think that your points were well received, and we also need this infrastructure. So I just want to say thank you for saying what can be, it's a tough position you were in, so thank you.
All right.
Please say yes or no. Councilmember Anguilari.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alders.
Yes.
Councilmember Curd.
Yes.
Councilmember Miles.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd.
Yes.
Councilmember Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be nice.
All right, next up is Agenda Bill 26079, recommended allocation of 1% for the Arts Program Fund for 2 permanent public art installations. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the second of 2 resolutions, and yeah, as I was corrected yesterday in one of my conversations with a council member, was I leapt to the exciting part of the $10,000 for the fishing frog, but there's more to it than that. So we're going to let Danae McGee, the Tourism and Arts Manager, really cover this. And she's also joined by Mary Beth Turk, who's the chair of the Arts Commission. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to the Arts Commission members. Danae, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. And thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. We're asking you tonight to approve a resolution for use of 1% for the arts program funds up to $90,000 to commission a professional public artist for artwork at Cedar Grove Park Playground and to purchase Fishing Frog, the permanent display for permanent display at the park at Bothell Landing Pedestrian Bridge. So council recognizes the importance that the important role public art plays in enriching Bothell's cultural landscape. In 2009, council adopted ordinance number 2013, creating the Art in Public Places program by dedicating 1% of eligible city capital improvement project costs to public art. Resolution number 1368, adopted in 2017, established policies for public art expenditures and authorized the Bothell Arts Commission to advise council on the use of 1% for public art funds. The current public art fund balance is $178,000. Approval of tonight's recommendation for $90,000 would leave $88,000 of available funds for future permanent public art projects.
The fourth point here about the Arts Commission endorsement, this is something that the Arts Commission met on earlier this year in one of our meetings, and is excited to be here tonight to get your endorsement and recommendation or approval of this as well. In addition to me attending tonight, Vice Chair Holly Hughes is here, as well as our newest commission member, Tanya Cadena Sagun. So we are excited to be here. Thank you.
Cedar Grove Park is currently being designed with a new inclusive playground that will create a welcoming, accessible, and socially engaging environment for all users. As part of the project, the Parks Board and the Bothell Arts Commission propose issuing a call to artists to create artwork integrated into the playground design, adding sensory richness, visual identity, and interactive elements to the space. The Creative Arts Grant Award Program also supports temporary public art projects. In 2025, Creative Arts Grant Award recipient and professional artist William Schlau created Fishing Frog, now displayed at the Bothell Landing pedestrian bridge as a temporary installation for up to 3 years. The original $10,000 grant covered design, fabrication, and installation costs, but not long-term maintenance, which is why Fishing Frog was introduced to the public as a temporary installation. Following strong, very strong community support for the piece, the Bothell Arts Commission explored purchasing Fishing Frog for the city's permanent public art collection. William Schlau has agreed to sell the artwork for $10,000. And the Bothell Arts Commission is requesting use of 1% for public art funds to complete the purchase and support future maintenance costs, which are expected to be minimal due to the durable materials used in the piece. That concludes our presentation. We hope that you consider approving this resolution, and we're happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, and to our Arts Commission members for being here tonight. I am super excited because I know I've said this to probably most people in this room, but I have said before, what is the Snohomish County version of our bridge? We don't really have a sort of uniting landmark in that half of the city. And not to put all the pressure on this artwork at Cedar Grove Park, but I kind of am a little bit that it would be really cool to have something that you can have a visual of and be like, I know where that is, that's in my city. So I'm very excited at the location that was chosen in the park, and excited that the city is purchasing Fishing Frog. What a great, cute artwork. I've heard from so many people who are like, I saw this cool frog at the park. Like, I just really appreciate that you've brought this to us and that we have a chance to do this. So thanks for your work on it.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Arts Commissioners, for being here tonight for this presentation. I have looked forward to the Arts Commission coming to us with something exciting for a really long time, and so I am very excited about especially what you did bring forward. I heard there was like thousands of people provided feedback on just how much, like immediately they saw Fishy Frog, they're like, can we keep it? It was really, that was the reaction that I saw throughout the city. And thank you for being responsive to our community and making it happen. And please pass our thanks on to the artists too for creating something so whimsical and exciting for our community. The Cedar Grove Park Playground absolutely is, I really love Councilmember Dodd's vision of a recognizable visual that people can point to in Snohomish County. And if this can become that sounds fantastic. But I also know that we're very lucky to get an inclusive playground that integrates art and sensory enjoyment in the space. And so thank you for bringing this. I'm absolutely happy to support it and can't wait to hear more from the Arts Commission. So thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
I'd love to offer a motion if we're there.
Oh, not quite.
Okay.
I'm gonna talk for half a second.
Done.
I am so excited this is going to be permanent. The fishing frog, especially, like I saw it, I was like, that is so cool. I have had friends reach out to me that like aren't even necessarily involved in politics. Like, what is that? Like, when did that get there? How long is it going to be there? So like this and in Cedar, the yard in Cedar Grove are like the easiest yeses I've had in such a long time. So I'm super excited to have you all here tonight. Thank you for coming to the Arts Commissioners. And yeah, I think we're ready for a motion. Councilmember Dodd.
I'd like to move the recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from the Deputy Mayor. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none. City Clerk, over there.
Please say yes or no. Councilmember Anguilari?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Miles?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Councilmember Alcaba?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Fantastic. It is now 7:44. We are going to take a 16-minute break and we'll be back at 8 o'clock. All right, welcome back. It is now 8 o'clock. Next up, we have Agenda Bill 26080, King County Wastewater Treatment Rate Comment Letter.
Thank you, Mayor. And tonight before you is a letter for consideration by the City Council to see if you'd like to sign on. There's been a lot of regional dialogue recently about concerns about proposed wastewater treatment rate increases. And due to the significant impact on Bothell ratepayers, wanted to bring this to your attention and see if communication to King County was warranted. With that, I'll turn things over to our Public Works Director, Aaron Lenhart, and Utilities and Development Services Manager, Boyd Benson, to provide additional information and take feedback on the proposed letter. Take it away.
Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. So the action that we're requesting this evening is to consider having the mayor, on behalf of the council, submit a letter to the Metropolitan King County Council about proposed wastewater treatment rates. So, as many of you know, Bothell operates a sewer utility that collects and conveys wastewater to King County's system for treatment. The King County Executive has proposed a 12.75% annual rate increase for that treatment between the years of 2027 and 2030. And he has proposed that to the King County Council for their consideration in June. This is the largest single expense for the city's wastewater utility. And as such, King County's rates significantly impact the sewer utility fund and its customers. The proposed letter requests that King County develop a more equitable rate structure than what they currently have. And so I'll hand it over to Boyd for a little more context and to help answer questions.
Good evening. So we just have 3 brief slides. The first slide shows King County rate forecast projections for the last 3 years. So the blue line is the rate forecast that was developed in 2024 for 25 on. Orange is developed in 25 or 26 on, and I think it's green, is the current rate forecast. And when we first looked at this forecasting back in 2024, 2025 as part of the utility rate study, we developed our fund finance models and we looked at rates required for 25 and 26. And at that time, to keep our sewer utility fiscally viable, we recommended 4.25% rate increases for both 25 and 26. As you can see, that the basis for those rate increases have changed significantly. And what's being proposed at this time is much higher in the 12.75 to 13.5% rate. Next, please. So this slide gives you an example of expenses for the sewer utility. For the chart on the left is our current 25-26 biennium. And you can see that the wholesale treatment costs are about half of the total utility costs. The rest capital, O&M, and taxes and interfund transfer. We forecast based on the current King County rate forecast that by 2031, 2032, the treatment portion of this will have increased significantly. You can see that the interfund transfers, utility tax, and O&M don't change much over that time. The major change is the King County wastewater treatment rate expense. Next. And right here is just kind of showing you over time, based on the current forecast, shows the treatment costs in orange and the O&M costs, forecasted O&M costs in blue. The increased costs the proposed rate increase forecast will basically double sewer treatment expenses within the next 5-6 years. And as you can see by the total expenses, our revenue will have to be, we'll have to match this expense to keep our utility fiscally viable. And if we do not, unless these proposed treatment rates change or we look at additional revenue sources, we will not have we'll have a negative fund balance by 2030, 2031. Okay, and then the rate treatment comment letter that we're requesting that you review is basically to ask King County to evaluate rates based more on affordability and equity with how they assign costs to different cities. That's it.
So there are other agencies adjacent to Bothell who are also considering sending letters. We've had some conversations with the city of Kirkland in particular, who is, their council will be considering a letter at their meeting next Tuesday. So if council has any questions, we are here to answer. Again, the requested action is to consider sending a letter to the Metropolitan King County Council about their proposed wastewater treatment rates.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward. Just as I'm processing this, what are the main reasons for the proposed rate hike? And aside from the letter, what is King County doing to make sure that those situations don't continue to get worse? Like, how are they getting ahead of a future big rate hike?
Yeah, so a lot of this rate increase is due to capital costs for capital programs and increase associated with those programs. In the agenda bill, in the letter, we specifically point out combined sewer overflow projects that are within, at the mouth of Duwamish. And that is one of the projects that increased their capital program spending by about 20%. So that's part of the request is to look at some of these capital programs and make sure that the folks that are paying for these programs are the ones that are benefiting from the programs. And then as to how King County is forecasting out future rates, the MUPAC, the advisory group, doesn't have a lot of say. It's MUPAC basically responds to King County proposals and we provide input, but they do have a pretty aggressive capital program and they're looking at ways to fund that over time. So if you look at the current forecast, they're looking at trying to not front-end load some of these costs, but take care of some of the costs in the short term with proposed decreases in the long term. And we typically don't see those, so that's why we're asking at this time to look at this a little more closely with respect to affordability and equity with different jurisdictions.
Thank you. And I would support the mayor sending a letter. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Councilmember Miles.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for this presentation and overview and the letters. How soon do we need to act?
So the King County Council is scheduled to begin discussions about the rate, I believe in early June. Yes, so very, very quickly.
Quickly.
Okay, I, like Councilmember Dodd, I support the mayor in sending the letter.
Councilmember Curd.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and for bringing it up. A couple of questions. The combined sewer overflow at the mouth of Duwamish, is that intended to extend the life and performance at West Point Treatment Plant?
That's a very good question. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Council has had staff come forward about our I&I inflow and infiltration program, where we're looking to reduce infiltration from the groundwater into our sewer system because that generates more treatment flow to treat. The same with inflow, which is like stormwater. This is a separate program from that program. So when you look at this one, it is basically to store combined sewer which is stormwater and sewage during high rainfall events in a very large reservoir, and then treat that as the precipitation tails off. So it's almost like a big detention tank for sewage. So it stores it, and then the effluent still gets treated, as opposed to what can happen now is that because of the combined sewers where stormwater is going directly into the sewer, you can have overflows into Puget Sound. So they're trying to avoid that.
Right, so it's a really important project for Puget Sound, of which we are upstream waters. And I just want to point out that a portion of the King County portion of Bothell drains to the same treatment facility for which this capital improvement program is also meant to go. So there could be an argument made that our community does contribute and partially benefit with a wider region as part contributors to the West Point treatment plant. So I guess that's just one thing to be considering, is that we can send a letter because, yeah, increasing rates, we didn't sort of plan that, and we aren't in control of King County's wastewater planning processes and obligation of infrastructure changes and updates. A question that I have, also kind of playing devil's advocate here, is did people in other jurisdictions that don't contribute to Brightwater, which most of our community does flow to, did those other jurisdictions pay into that? And is there a regional economy of scale and benefit for contributing to these larger infrastructure, mega infrastructure projects that benefit our region as a whole?
I'm going to, real quick, and then Director Lenhart will respond. You bring up some very good points. There is regional treatment, and that is directly offset by Brightwater. So there is regional treatment. The point of the letter is to look at how we are assessed our rates, because the city of Bothell is spending significant capital effort to reduce inflow and infiltration. And you've seen that in the past, and you'll see it in the future budget. What we're requesting is maybe look at how those costs are allocated for facilities that may only benefit jurisdictions that have combined sewer, that allow stormwater in their sewer system. That's what we're asking. So I hear where you're coming from. I'm sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
I just want to point out that there is a discrepancy in the policies that we have being part of a wider region and, you know, contributing to the health of Puget Sound. This could be part of our commitment to those policy inputs too. So I'm fine sending a letter, but I'm also fine knowing that we need to step up and contribute as part of a wider region for this. Our county and our whole region is built on sewage treatment. We wouldn't have the cities or the places that we love today without it. And I know that it's a regional cooperation, and we all bear the benefits and frankly, the risks of aging infrastructure. And there will become a time where our infrastructure is aging, and other jurisdictions will be asked to pay into resources that help our facilities and our aging infrastructure as well. And so I want to be careful to, you know, going forward, that we set the tenor of the conversation that we're willing to be a collaborator, but understanding that we don't have a lot of input in the process, and that sort of collaboration and consultation would be helpful as we set our rates and as our constituencies are impacted by these increasing fees and structures. So I'm obviously conflicted, but I'm going to be supportive of the letter just to open up a dialogue.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate the thoughts that Councilmember Kurt has put forward, because as residents of this community and in this region, it was horrifying to hear headlines about the wastewater that was entering into our water systems. And I absolutely do support, improving treatment because it needed to be done. Like it's really about remediating the negative impacts of the past and not necessarily being able to undo the mistakes of the past, but also to do better going forward. And I also think that this letter makes a very good point about whose financial responsibility that is. And so I support sending this letter. I support it's always a good thing when you're bringing up a problem to offer a proposed solution. And you are offering a proposed solution that would protect the ratepayers of Bothell. And I do appreciate that piece of it. And I also do want to see our region do better, especially when it comes to environmental stewardship, and want to be a team player. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be shouldering the cost that other areas also need to be shouldering as well. So I appreciate the nod towards equity and asking for equitable treatment for City of Bothell residents. And so I do support sending on to this letter. Thank you.
All right, if nobody else has anything to say, I will accept a motion. Deputy Mayor?
I will make a motion to have the mayor, on behalf of the council, submit the letter to the Metropolitan King County Council about proposed wastewater treatment rates.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the recommended action. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no. Councilmember Anguilari?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alderks?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Miles?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Councilmember Alcott?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple of study sessions, so let's go down there. All right, welcome to where we do our study sessions. We have Agenda Bill 26018 for affordable housing and MFTE updates.
Thank you, Mayor. And going along with Affordable Housing Week, here we are. So I'm going to turn things directly over for introduction and context to our Deputy Director of Community Development, Christian Getz. He's joined by Community Development Director Jason Greenspan and Senior Planner Ray Sosa. Christian, thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. It's great to be back again. Yes, we're going to talk about affordable housing, which for the last few years has been the tip of everybody's tongue, working through it. And staff have been, diligently working through things like the comprehensive plan update, affordable housing, middle housing, voluntary incentives. And throughout all of that, we've been working really closely with the community members, reaching out to and cultivating relationships with the building community, making sure we can get their input and we can pull in all these perspectives through all the conversations that have led up to this and as we move forward. So tonight, there's no no action requested. We're here to seek input on really just two items. So really, the first question on a potential shift of the city's approach involving affordable housing, going from a voluntary program to a mandatory, paired with that consideration of a series of offsets and incentives that we built together with input from the community, input from the Planning Commission. So just trying to understand these items a little bit more thoroughly and planning on leaving here tonight with ideas to develop some scale options to come back. So again, no decisions, really just wanting to know, are we on the right track for studying this, which we would then come back with pro formas and additional information for council to consider. We've got these three discussion questions for you. They'll return at the end of the presentation. No need to memorize. They're in the packet as well, but we'll use these to just guide us through. So starting off, let's get to the why. Why are we here? Why are we bringing this back to you this evening? To get at this, I want to walk through some important background and then some key steps that we've taken to lead to this point. So first is some of the city-initiated updates, the 2024 comp plan, which was a huge endeavor that involved most everybody in this room, and set out to establish increased densities. You'll remember, and for those listening in, we set those densities to span across the city, not just in our centers, moving them throughout the neighborhoods. That increased density has led to lower density communities being raised, have increased densities that have resulted in a lot more interest in redevelopment, and we're starting to see that come about even in these economic times that we're seeing. We worked through our voluntary affordable housing incentives last year, expanding it to areas throughout almost half the city. And with that conversation from the Planning Commission came this recommendation to revisit a mandatory approach. Should we approach this year? And then bookending both of those, or I guess tying last year, but prior to the comp plan update was the middle housing work that we did, where we set off and we initiated the action, and then we wrapped it up last year, where we established a base density of 4, allowing up to 6. Getting into some of the state legislation for more background and context, House Bill 1220 was one of the fundamental components that was used to build out the comp plan and the housing targets, which each jurisdiction was required to plan for and accommodate housing to households of all income levels. So you've heard us talk about this before. This is the requirement that to establish zoning and development codes that we will see in the completion of residential units below market rate. So those are the 0 to 30s, 30 to 50, 50 to 80% AMIs, not just market rate. And these were all established, and you'll see in a slide here the countywide targets that were established for each jurisdiction over 20 years. That's table 1 on page 87 of your packet if you wanted to jump there already. And then finally, Senate Bill 5148, which is also known as the Housing Accountability Act. That's the oversight bill that established reporting and accountability measures to ensure that housing production is aligning with those 1220 targets. We're starting to see the state look at that already through initial reporting, and then our anticipated 5-year look back, or what's everyone's calling the 5-year look back period at the end of 2029, where we report out in 2030 what has been built in the first quarter of our 20-year plan. The next slide, I'm going to talk through this just a little bit. This is pulling in the data from the comprehensive plan, breaking apart by county, our total housing needs. These are the countywide planning goals and targets that were given to us within each of the AMI bands. We combined everything in the greater than 80% just for simplicity. The table gets pretty extensive if we don't do that. And we've started tracking these as far as completed projects. Nothing's really done until somebody can live in it. So those are the ones that we are tracking and will continue to. We do have data for what's under construction, what's in conceptual design, land use permitting, But to date, we've seen just under 200 units, all above 80% AMI, having been completed and issued a certificate of occupancy. And those range from single-family homes to condominiums, townhomes, and multifamily, all of which were started well before the comprehensive plan began. So we'll use this and we'll keep growing it. You'll see it come back time and time again as we provide updates on development activity. What are we seeing in which income band as we move forward? And I'm going to hand it over to Ray here in a second. So that's the work that we've completed already, and the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission recommendation to consider a mandatory approach, those 1220 targets, the Housing Accountability Act, all that data that's been completed has landed us here this evening. So really want to talk about a potential shift to a mandatory affordable housing code, and to do that, we'd have to align with the state requirement to provide that balance, show what those offsets are, and to talk through those, I'm going to turn it over to Ray.
Thanks, Christian. As Christian mentioned, we have these goals here that we want to meet, and so staff are looking at the following list of incentives that you see above. But these offsets and incentives presented here are to entice residential developers to build a much-needed, de-restricted, deeply affordable units. We recognize that units at the price points and AMI levels significantly below the current market rate cannot get built alone without providing developers a comprehensive and attractive enough menu of offsets and incentives. Simply put, we can't house people in projects that don't get built. Our proposals ensure that developments in Bothell can pencil out and actually get built, keeping Bothell an attractive place to invest and build on. To that end, staff are proposing the following development incentives, offsets and incentives: open space flexibility, reducing in open space requirements, or waiving and consolidating private and public open space requirements. Currently, these open space requirements in the BMC establish a minimum of private and public open space to be installed on a project-by-project basis. Staff propose considering reductions or waiving of both private and public open space requirements, given Bothell's abundant park system that we all know and love. Also looking at development standards and relief. Flexibility focused on supporting development of affordable units. For the full list of identified standards proposed for adjustment, you can turn to attachment 1 of tonight's memo. Also size-based standards and incentive fee. Development of a size-based incentive fee can encourage the construction of moderate-sized housing options and capture revenue from larger homes to fund affordable housing. Currently, there are limited methods the city funds affordable housing development projects. Following the council's priority under a Connected and Thriving City, which seeks to refine our housing strategy approach, staff are considering adding more ways to fund affordable housing, such as this proposed fee. And lastly, looking at permit and fee-related flexibility. As the name implies, reducing or waiving fees for projects with affordable units. Staff recommend these approaches as they offer realistic incentives and offsets and present the greatest potential to be implemented or modified within the city's authority to enact or expand affordable housing incentive programs. All combined, these zoning and land use approaches represent a potential shift from a voluntary to a mandatory affordable housing approach. Based on council's feedback tonight, staff will continue to explore and evaluate these offsets and incentives, returning with potential amendments that could support a mandatory affordable housing approach as part of an inclusionary zoning model in the future.
Okay, and then the last thing that we tagged onto this is the multifamily tax exemption. We wanted to include this as it really is what I think of as a yes and part of affordable housing, where it needs to align and accompany, or it could be aligned and accompany affordable housing projects. So we're gonna have this trail the work that we're doing. We'd like to have a trail the work that we're doing on a potential mandatory approach, and looking at this with an overhaul, because we haven't seen any interest in the program since it was created about five and a half years ago. We've met with developers. We had a few focus groups completed last fall, and what we heard was that it didn't align with what they were looking for. Obviously, they'd like it to be as flexible as possible. We wanted to get that input. They'd like to see some improvements, a few of which we've listed here. Some of the things that we could include in potential future discussions around legislative policy surrounding parking inconsistencies within the state laws. So the MFTE state law says you have to provide parking for MFTE units, but the state law that just passed about parking said you don't need to provide parking for affordable housing units. So those obviously were not built out to align. Also looking at aligning the exemption duration with the duration of the affordability. And to do any of these, we'd want to make sure we square them with the comp plan and with our current policies. There's a lot more to do here. We'll continue to work with our development group, make sure that we're pulling in their input and their perspective as we work through this, returning with pro formas as far as how these would work, what they would equate to, working with finance as well on what the potential impacts might be from a budgetary standpoint, and then bring that back for discussion. This is handled all in sort of inside baseball, but Title III rather than Title 12, so it's not a development regulation. It's handled on its own track, but we do think that they warrant having discussion together, at least at this point, and then we can pull them apart and run them through to the end. So again, no action tonight, really looking for just some general input after what we've presented here and provided in the packet materials. And with that, I will set up these questions to support the conversation.
I like to take an opportunity to go first when I can. I have a couple things to say. I'm going to talk about the MFTE first. I love the recommendations that we did. We got some comments today from somebody who owns property in Bothell and wants to build here using our MFTE, and the recommendations would handle the main objections that gentleman had. I was brand new on council when we did this the first time, and I want to use our MFTE as a tool to get affordable housing, but also as a tool to simply create more housing to be built. So if we align the dates with the tax incentive and the affordability requirements, like, in 13 years or however long it's going to be, those units are going to now go on the market as market rate units, and more market rate units makes everybody's rent a little bit cheaper. So like I see a benefit there down the road too, even as we lose the mandatory affordability. So yes, love your recommendations there. Like let's tune this to get stuff built is my feedback. Like let's get affordable housing built through this process. Some that is not perfect is much better than none that could conceivably be better if it were real, which is what we're getting right now. In terms of mandatory ability, like I kind of feel the same way that I felt in December when we talked about this. I mean, we haven't gotten any housing built since January 2025 that's mandatory affordable. Our voluntary incentives just went into effect in January of this year. So like, I don't feel that the zero there is a super fair expectation of what's going to happen in the future, especially because we have like the Bothell Urban Project coming on board, hopefully in the next few years as well. I would like to give those some time to work and do everything else that we can before we add mandatory affordability. Like when we tax housing, we make housing more expensive, and it's hard to get cheaper housing when you're adding cost to it. So like I want to see the work that we've done in our comp plan that is going really well. Like I want to let that cook before we do anything that might slow it down. I've been really happy with the results we've seen. Our comp plan is doing a really good job. Mandatory affordability is a tax on new renters to pay for affordable housing, and I don't love it, and I don't love what it can potentially do to supply. I do, however, like all of the recommendations in terms of the, like, here's what you can do because of this. Is there a way that we could add more options to the voluntary and make the voluntary even more appealing and give that a chance to work before we do something that could potentially drive down housing production in Bothell?
Yeah, there's always ways to add things to the voluntary.
Okay.
You can kind of tailor it to the needs of a jurisdiction, as we may have regulations in place that no other city does. So.
Or give I mean, give people a menu, like you can choose from these things, like pick some of them, or like some way to make it appealing to the maximum amount of potential builders to use those incentives. I mean, honestly, the mandatory public space, like, I see more value in extra housing than I do in that. So like, I'm fine if we just don't have that. So like, yeah, give it away as an incentive. Like I think I've only spent time in the like public space of some of the buildings that have gone up over the last 5 years, just to like take a field trip to see where they actually are and find them. So I love the ideas, the offsets, but the one offset that I'd want to have a larger discussion around is the fee on larger housing. Totally open to it. Like, I want to see more smaller units in general, and the more we can do to incentivize that, I think the better. Everything else is an easy yes on that, in terms of tuning a voluntary affordable housing incentive to it. So that is my take.
This is really interesting, sorry. I'm glad that you went first, Mayor, because I agree with all of that. If someone is building a large project, I would really like them to go up to add more units. I know there's a project in North Creek that has, I don't know where they're at. I know they weren't in the list because they're not built yet. Nobody can live there yet. But I know that they took advantage of extra stories with affordable units. I think whatever we can do within that menu to say, just go up, that we have so much more vertical space than horizontal space to use. So if it's possible to somehow be like, here's a menu, but today's special is adding more stories, like it would be great if we could encourage that. I think if we're going to reduce public space, I agree that public open space can be a mixed bag of useful and not, but I would love to just have some kind of standard, like there are bike racks and benches at, on the sidewalk or something. So there's something that still makes around the building feel like a community versus just there's a giant building now and who knows what happens in there. Probably people doing normal stuff. But some kind of little bit like, hey, make the surroundings, a community versus just one big building if we're not going to have open space to share. Yeah, but I also wonder with the conflict in state law around MFTE requiring parking and then the newer state law, how does that clarification come about? Is it going to be, are we going to seek like an update in our legislative agenda to ask for that to be sorted out? How are we going to find out?
You should mention that we're right now in the process of refining some of our potential legislative priorities for the next session, and that's one of the ideas that we're floating, is to get those inconsistencies resolved and have the state really look at that and work with cities to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen. It's probably not just in the space of MFTE where we have conflicting policies and regulations that are not allowing projects to move forward, and it's not necessarily a city's regulations that are doing that.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Thank you. And then I think the only other thing that stuck out, I do like the idea of the fee on, let's say, oversized housing. I don't know how you determine what's too big, but I'd love to hear more about that when something firmer comes back, because I think that that's a really fascinating idea. And yeah, I can't say enough. Have people go up, not out, as much as possible. Thank you.
Just a quick comment to Councilmember Dodd. The building that you're thinking of in North Creek is in my neighborhood. You've passed it.
I have. You're right.
You have.
Thank you.
Has construction started on that?
No.
Okay.
It's
Still a
just there.
parking lot?
Yeah, it's just there.
Okay.
I think the conversation about, or hesitance to support mandatory affordable housing is well placed, and I also am concerned that 2030 comes around, we're only 4 years away, and the numbers that we want to see in the lower and moderate income bands are not there. So I do think it is kind of early to change our experiment, but I also, this is another tool in the toolbox that we should really give a lot of thought to. I liked the conversation at Planning Commission last month where they were talking about the community amenities of open space and how to other members of the community that open space might not really be relevant or worthwhile to the people who live in the possibly affordable housing there. We want to make sure that they have access to amenities and that we're not creating an echelon of housing that folks shy away from because of its lack of amenities. And maybe that's, market conditions necessitate that housing that is affordable is not as desirable as housing that is expensive. But that is a worthwhile consideration, is these community benefits that we're wanting to prioritize. Are there other creative options that we're not looking at, like setbacks or sort of logistics of development rather than simply taking away requirements that we put on buildings to make them livable. So I'm conflicted. I don't have anything really worthwhile to add, so I'm just blathering. But I'm also deeply concerned about the economy, as many people are, and while developers are looking for consistency in regulations, I also feel that we will be entering a time where projects don't necessarily pencil to our pro forma. So I'm hoping that whatever we do, we continue to update this regularly, our policies regularly, to reflect market conditions and the economy and whether things are getting built. But I've said for a long time that we're not going to get 0 to 30% affordable housing from requiring a developer to do it. Those really deep levels of affordability are things that we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is and lean in. And so I think that's sort of a different, that's a different conversation than what you're asking for today, but in some regard it is kind of a helpful guide or guardrail or boundary on what we're looking at here. So increasing the depth and consistency of housing affordability, I think there are limits here to what we can do with mandatory affordability requirements. So I'm hesitant to toe that line and get up close to it, especially in uncertain economic conditions.
Is it an option to reduce required public space where a property is well served by our park system, but still require it where there are no parks within whatever set distance makes sense?
We could look into that, and I think the majority of the most residential development, multifamily development, it does have private open space requirements. The public space public open space requirements are primarily in the downtown. So creating the area by the pop apartments, they all have their own private outdoor space, whether it's balconies or other exterior spaces. But yeah, we can look into that and consider what that factor would look like.
Yeah, I don't want to create housing that sucks, but I also think that we can acknowledge that there are parts of the city that excel with park availability and parts that don't, and hopefully pivot around that a little bit.
So looking at that table, we have 0 to 30% AMI 5,300, 30 to 50% is 2,200, and 50 to 80 is 2,000. Do you think if we do any of this, we're going to make a dent in any of those numbers?
It's a great question. I can say that what we are seeing right now with projects in, whether it's in the land use permitting, building permit review, or in construction. So before that 199 number, we have approximately 1,900 residential units in that process. Some, yeah, and hopefully they all turn into permits and they all turn into occupied structures. The sites that have had will have, and other cities have said this too, will have the biggest benefit are those that have city control, like P South, where part of that agreement establishes some conditions for what needs to be included. So that's going to provide 200 units within both the 30 to 50 and the 50 to 80. So it puts a dent in it, but I don't know if we have enough control over enough city parcels. So it will support more opportunities, but these are uncertain times, and so we just won't know until we.
Like if you 0 to 30, for example, to Councilmember Kurd's point, we need to put our money where our mouth, like we did with P South. So we did get some of that, but we are 53 to 500, 7,500 or so. We need between 0 and 50% AMI in the next 20 years. How much land do we need to own to be able to give away for us to make that?
It would be a lot, and part of the work that Ray's doing on the Housing Action Plan, finding strategies, it might tie into legislative agendas, like Jason referenced, where we and all the other cities need state support for the really, really difficult ones to find, because no matter how many offsets you provide, whether it's setback reduction, build to the sky, it won't matter. That will be a really, really difficult to think without I would just say buckets of money that could support those things to subsidize it at the lower AMI bands.
Because so if we add the mandatory piece to this this problem we're trying to solve, is that going to make things better or worse? For us to move an inch.
So if we take out the city-controlled site, we take out the 200 units. We'd say, well, there's 1,700 units there. Of those 1,700, there's about just under 100, or just around 100 that are currently proposed. So that percentage is well below what we would need to achieve. So if you could have a mandatory that would say all of the units that are proposed, 10% of them are going to be affordable, then you would at least be getting that 10%.
Would you though? Wouldn't the developer say, you know what, it's not penciling out for me anymore, I'm not going to withdraw? Yeah. Like the email we got today, right. So, I mean, that is a risk we're taking with this, because we have our goals. I mean, the people providing the housing have their goals, so we need to figure out where that intersection is. This is where I think that the pro formas and scenario, simulations that we need to be able to. I mean, if you talk about 7,000 units in the next 20 years between 0 and 50%, no, zero. That's zero. Yeah, 0 and 50%. It's quite a bit of. With a short amount of time, I mean, time is flying, So, and things take time for feasibility and permitting and design, all that stuff. And even if we decide to do this right now, I'm thinking out loud right now, I'm not making any, so that's why I'm trying to get your feedback. So even if we decide to do mandatory today, those 1,700 in process, won't they get grandfathered in before we kick in the mandatory?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So they we'll tell them, now you have to do 10% or whatever the number is, or is it?
They're set under their regulations, so.
So they're set, so now we have to wait for new applicants.
Right.
Yeah. So, what do you think? I mean, what's that? I know you're trying to get and you looked at the city manager. I know, what makes sense, because we're playing with those scenarios. I'm asking the questions.
Sure. And it's a really difficult time right now to answer the question. The preliminary work we had done last fall, all the pro formas came back, just market rate came back not feasible. So it wasn't feasible to build just a market rate project, and it probably still isn't. So the conversation would be totally different if we were fine. The global economy was humming along.
2% interest rates.
And we there could be, no issues with resources. It would be a different conversation. And I've, having experience with other jurisdictions that have had a 10% mandatory, yes, you saw incremental growth over time, and it adds up in the long run. But even that 10%, right? We've talked about what 75% of our housing is below 80%. If you just look at the 20-year target, it's like, well, we can't say 75% have to be affordable. That's not feasible. So how do we put the dent in it? And maybe it's, seeing what happens with what we have now. Maybe it's shifting to mandatory. And what we're looking for now is just, if we came back with materials that identify, here's the offsets that align with the state law requirement. If we were to consider a mandatory, here's what it would be. Here's what the pro formas come back as. We would like it to pencil out to show, well, it's as equitable as a project, as beneficial as a project, with a mandatory or without. So that's the test we have to pass.
It's a discussion, so I'm asking.
I mean, if it's not feasible to build something right now at market rate, why would we consider adding mandatory affordability? It's just going to take longer for anything to start getting built if we do that, wouldn't it?
Logically, yes.
And then wouldn't it tank our permitting cycle and then all of our fees that we depend on for revenue? Yeah, good questions. Have you heard of City of Spokane's kind of innovative approach to withgo their sales tax revenue for affordable housing projects that source, like oftentimes when you're buying materials for a project, you ship them to the project site. And because we have a state where sales tax is charged at the source, or not at the source, at the sink. So Spokane was saying, for affordable housing projects, we won't charge the city's sales tax revenue. Like, are there other like
Don't
creative?
tell Quan. Don't tell Quan.
So yeah, we have to put our money where our mouth is somehow, right? And so this is one of the other controls one of the other levers that we have. I'd be interested in seeing kind of a overview of what they've seen, if it's been implemented, or if they're losing a lot of revenue and are looking to like stop that. But have you heard of other ways besides mandatory? Arch always talks up Redmond and mandatory, and we're not, unfortunately, we don't have the economy of Redmond to build.
Yeah, we've been listening in on conversations around MFTE as an option, and that's across the state. So there's some jurisdictions that have utilized it, and it's likely what we've seen is the duration of the affordability requirement. It does tie where we see higher numbers of just units being produced. It ties with the duration of the exemption. So if it's a 12-year duration, and the exemption ends then, the affordability ends then. Sometimes they have a flexibility to extend it another 12 years, which is great because then you get 24 years of an affordable unit, but then it sunsets. Those are throughout the state, so they're different markets that we need to look at, and the data for 2025 will be coming out soon, so we can definitely bring that back and include it within the conversation around MFTE. But it is a tool that a lot of jurisdictions have utilized, especially when they're in not necessarily they don't have a mandatory affordable program established for one reason or another. So there's no one answer, but we can always continue to seek out other mechanisms.
I'd love to weigh in. I am not interested in mandatory affordable housing for reasons stated by my colleagues. But some of the questions that I have are, well, first, I guess I'll make a comment. This is going back to, and I think it's been brought up a couple times, but to what the mayor said around like the sunsetting of like deeded affordability. That it's my understanding in the housing market that when units first go to market and they're brand new, they're like you're paying a premium for the newness of that unit. But if it's been 13 years of lived in or 24 years of lived in, based on what you're saying, those will be considered older stock when they come to market. And there's actually going to be some it's more attainable and a level of like affordability because they're not going to be charging as much as a brand new, luxury unit. It'll be charged at older stock prices. And that often is an opportunity that helps get, people who are starting out, young professionals, families into housing. And so that also has, I think, a tail end benefit later on when it's no longer deeded. So I just want to put that out there. And then one question that I have is, it is my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that when we're talking about MFTE, we're really talking about the like 50 to 80% AMI, because there's not necessarily going to be affordable units with the tax exemption in, like, definitely not permanent supportive housing, and often, not going to be non-permanent supportive housing either. So am I understanding that correctly? We would expect it to be at the higher levels of the low-income AMI?
Correct. We see through programs across the state, it's between 50 and 80% that they're offering.
So really, like, this policy targets that, third column, right? 50 to 80% AMI. And I think that's a really useful kind of metric for us to look at and understand. So, we're really talking about policy choices that could positively impact the number of units, to hit that goal of 2012 specifically. And so I like what I've heard tonight around the open space flexibility, especially around the parks piece. If we're looking at Snohomish, we know that parks are underserved, however. And so there is a balance there. I appreciate the work that the Planning Commission put into the development standards relief. Generally, I really respect and support the recommendations that they're coming out of them for that, as well as the size-based standards. We've talked about, I appreciate Councilmember Curd saying permit, not just the permit and fee flexibility of trying to bring down the costs of being in the business of building affordable housing, or reduced reduced rate housing, but also like how can we help save on the building costs too? Permit fees, maybe, tax on materials. Like I would add that in and consider bringing that forward. But really what like I've been sitting here thinking about is how are we going to build 1,800 units of permanent supportive housing in a city that has no permanent supportive housing at this point. And I know that is not the topic of this study session. And I'm wondering when that is going to be a topic of a study session, and when do we get to start digging into what it would mean to bring permanent supportive housing to Bothell. And I recognize that the biggest number on this list is actually the non-permanent supportive housing, 0 to 30% AMI. And so like, I'm curious when do we get to have those conversations?
We're going to bring back the Housing Action Plan in June, where we'll talk about the strategies, make sure that what we've provided can establish mechanisms to achieve just that. So we'll be taking it to Planning Commission next week, and then bring it back here, I think the second meeting in June.
June 9th.
Cool. I love that there's an answer for that. And I realize that that's part of the bigger housing action plan strategy, and that's a piece of it. And so I do hope at some point when we dig into the housing action plan, like there will be study sessions specifically on permanent supportive housing and addressing the challenges and opportunities and goals related to that. There was one other thing that I was thinking about. It'll come back if it comes back. Thank you.
So these are all incentives seemingly for like pretty big projects. And thinking about PSH or talking about 0 to 30% AMI non-PSH, I find myself thinking about projects for those for like adults with IDD or other sort of smaller situations. Will the Housing Action Plan have sort of strategies to help encourage smaller specialized projects like we hear about when we get like the Arch update, for example, where it's a home that can serve 6 people who have a caregiver on site, for example, like how we can foster that too? Because some of these just won't be in large projects. I'm looking at the Deputy Mayor's targets graph because I realize I'm pointing at the back of a laptop to you three.
So currently the goals are not that specific to the level of the IDD housing, but we do have goals that are more broader, talk about supporting affordable housing such as IDD through more, I guess there's more general ways, like funding, looking at alternative sources of funding for supporting the housing, or partner with communities to address where we can build that housing or how we can support them to get that housing built. And then lastly, looking at also the tenants and renters' rights, looking to make sure that any residents who have those conditions who are renting are supported and are able to stay in their homes. So we're keeping it very general, but through and I don't want to spoil it for next month, but as we do our engagement in the summer, we will be asking the community as well if we need to fine tune anything or be more specific, what are those specifications that you mentioned that we can then include in the second update in the fall.
That totally makes sense. Would you be talking to like the ARC of King and Snohomish County as part of that? I'm thinking about groups we don't always hear from on housing, but that might have that specialized.
I'll take that into consideration, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. I feel like we didn't answer your questions, did we? Or we answered questions, but we gave more questions. I guess it seems like a set of answers.
I think we understand where the council's coming from on the mandatory question, and that there is interest in the incentives and considering those for the current voluntary. Sort of summarizing what I've heard here tonight, and so we can definitely come back with what those might look like to tag on, scaling them. I mean, one of the things that Planning Commission did bring up is ensuring that these aren't just for as Councilmember Dodd mentioned, smaller projects, small to mid-sized builders, they shouldn't just benefit the large sites, even though that's where we get the biggest bang for the buck of units on a sheet. But finding mechanisms, and part of this will be within the Housing Action Plan. How do we support small to mid-sized builders with, how to even understand what MFTE is, they can still avail themselves to it, even though it might seem, difficult. Arch does have, can support how somebody could go through that process. But we could look to scale these so that they're beneficial to those sites where they would get a significant benefit from, whether it's a setback reduction or an open space reduction on a 8-unit project versus a 100-unit project. Sometimes that's more meaningful because of the scale of the site and the flexibility that it can provide. So,
I have one more question, then I promise I'm done. Do you have an estimate of, like, I'm looking at slide 5. It is my guiding star tonight. And we have these, big round zeros in 4 of the columns. Do we have estimates of what's in progress? Like, maybe it won't come through and it won't, go into like the completed column, but like, I just would like to know, especially in this 50 to 80% AMI column, like, what are we anticipating will come online based on what's in the pipeline now?
If everything that's in the pipeline goes through to completion, which could be between 2 to 4 years, we would see 209 within that column of the 50 to 80. 101 of those are P South. SAMA is another one, and then the one over by Councilmember Miles' residence, over by the Home Depot. So, which is 10% of the total target, the total 20-year target. So it puts a dent in that, and that's if those complete. There's others that are in the lower band, which is a smaller chunk of that, but understanding that it sounds as though the focus within that 50 to 80 is where council's going, understanding that the others are going to be harder. And if we can get any of those, great, we'll eke them out where we can.
Is there a way, I know that the voluntary incentives that we have in, on the project in North Creek bring it up to 8 stories. Do those incentives exist, and can we pair those with the MFTE? So like, could somebody in downtown like use those and build a similar building?
The MFTE doesn't have the height bonuses. The benefit is the tax
abatement,
exemption, and that developer is interested in the program in pursuing their project through that.
So there's not really a way to stack the voluntary incentives and the MFT. You kind of have to pick one.
They more or less align with because currently it's 20% of the project is MFTE, and the voluntary incentive is 10%. So our hope with how we would build an MFTE program is that it overlaps 10 over that 10, and then the other 10 is whatever it is.
I guess the only thing is if somebody's going to utilize the MFTE, then they don't get the height bonus, and then we have wasted vertical space. Like, is there any way to, like, because if somebody's building an MFTE building and a certain percentage of them have to be affordable, if we give them more stories, then we get more units. So like, why would we have 20% of fewer units as opposed to 10% of more units using the voluntary? Like, is there a way we can get the height up if you use the MFTE?
We can look at that.
Cool.
I have a follow-up question. I know. It's like we just opened up a whole new can of worms.
I saw you when I said it, you're like, ooh.
Well, Bothell Urban, SAMA, and the North Creek 8-story, are any of those using MFTEs?
No, but they are using a good amount of Amazon Arch chip.
Yes.
Other funding sources.
And so right now in the pipeline, we do not have any units projected to come online in the next 2 to 4 years that utilize MFTE.
Correct.
Okay. and I recognize that this is why we're here, is to like, how do we develop an MFTE program that is attractive enough to use so that there's actually units that come out of it. Yeah. Okay. But that's not encouraging to me. Thank you for the information.
Do we want to keep going? Because you made me think of a question. Sorry, I have to do it.
Is it related to the study session or another topic?
It is related to the, no, let's talk about the World Cup. No. So the question is, to that point, is MFTE even the right conversation to have? If people aren't using it because they may not find value, is it the right program? And if it is, then what are some tweaks we can make to it? And if it's not, then let's just dump it and think of something else, right?
Right. I think we've seen other jurisdictions see success with an MFTE program, and since we've had no interest, we wouldn't be doing our job if we weren't saying, let's take this apart and put it back together in a different form.
Okay, makes sense.
I wouldn't say no interest. We got a public comment tonight expressing interest.
Expressing interest in us changing things so he could build something.
Exactly, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And that's what, like, I was thinking, like, if we are stuck with the, like, base density and somebody wants to build a project, if we allow more density, we get more affordable units. Like, anyway, I'm sorry. I already had that. I'm seeing comments slowing down. Do you have everything you need? Perfect. Thank you. All right. Our last agenda bill of the evening, y'all can sit around and chat after while I go home, if you would like, is Agenda Bill 26082, Open Government Training. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And tonight we're joined by Anne Marie Soto, who is a Madrona Law partner, and is going to walk us through the Open Public Meetings Act, Public Records Act, and some social media do's and don'ts. Anne Marie, you might remember, has been with us before and has developed a special emphasis on open government in her practice. She regularly provides Public Records Training Act to local government employees, elected officials, and speaks at several conferences. Just as a note too, while the slide deck is imposing of 51 slides, Anne Marie will cruise through this, but consider this a training guide that you'll be able to refer to back later. With that, I'll turn things over to Anne Marie to lead us through and answer your questions.
All right, yes, I know it's a little daunting when you see 51 slides, but some of them are just pictures. So we're just gonna go right through. It still will take us a while. Feel free to ask questions. If it's something I'm gonna cover during the presentation, I'll let you know. But if you wanna jump in with any questions at any time, that's totally fine with me. So what are we gonna talk about today? We're gonna talk about what is the Public Records Act and why should you care? We're going to talk about your responsibilities as a government agency and some challenges related to that. We'll do a little refresher on the definition of public record, how to respond to records requests, some records retention matters, and then we'll shift over to the OPMA, do a quick refresher, and end with some risk management strategies and takeaways and some additional resources that you can check out on your own, because that is probably what you're going to want to do tonight as soon as we leave here. All right, so what is the Public Records Act and why should I care? So the Public Records Act is a requirement for public agencies such as City of Bothell. You're required to make your records available for inspection and copying upon request. It's important for everyone within the agency to at least have some familiarity with the requirements under the Public Records Act. All your employees and your officials really should know. And then there are certain employees and elected officials who are required to have training under the PRA. Another reason that you should care, Public Records Act can come with some pretty hefty penalties, even if it's just a simple mistake. You know, we're all human, everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes you have a public records request that gets missed or some other issue is involved, and all of a sudden you're looking at hefty penalties. And so it's just really important to understand your responsibilities under the Public Records Act. And finally, you should care because you really need to be cognizant of your requirements under the PRA, because it will help you to avoid litigation, or it helps you to prepare for litigation in case that does arise in the future. So what are some of your responsibilities and challenges that local government agencies face? So I don't need to go through every single one of these, but these are some of the responsibilities under the Public Records Act for public agencies, again, such as City of Bothell. You have to have a policy, you have to have a public records officer, you have to have a list of exemptions, exemptions that are outside of the Public Records Act. You have to have an index and track your public records requests. You also have to retain and maintain your records in accordance with state retention requirements. So some challenges, however, that we see with a lot of public agencies, and this is a really big one, is keeping up with technology. We've seen a lot of changes in technologies in the way agencies use technology just within the last few years, especially ever since the COVID-19 pandemic. Things like using Zoom and using Teams and Slack and sending text messages. So it's really important to stay up on the requirements on, with the Public Records Act, with these changes in technology, so that you can make sure that you are maintaining your records in accordance with the law. Funding and staffing levels is a really big thing. You know, some agencies will only have one person who works on their public records requests, or sometimes they don't have someone who is full-time working on public records requests. They have, you know, someone who that's like a second job for them. But again, it's really a responsibility of everyone in the agency to understand what your requirements are under the Public Records Act. And so having the appropriate funding and staffing levels is just really important. Dealing with serial or difficult requesters, there are some requesters that will send a request to every agency in the state, some who are frequent flyers and everyone knows their names. That doesn't mean that they don't have the right to make public records requests just like anyone else, but it is something that agencies do face, is how to deal with these types of requesters. Maintaining consistent documentation. You know, we have seen a lot of improvements with that since agencies have been required to do tracking for their public records requests using the JLARC. But at the same time, you know, you have different people working on requests, and sometimes there are staffing changeover, or you have people who might not be used to working on requests, and so you're not having consistent documentation. It's really important to have policies in place that really cement how the City of Bothell is going to document how it responds to requests, so that you are consistent all the time and not having to worry about if somebody leaves, now we don't know what were they doing, I don't understand this. You know, it's just really important to make sure that you have a standard way of handling your documentation. And then maintaining records that are held by third parties. So you have records that people other than someone within City Hall might have that are responsive to requests, such as your contractors and consultants or your volunteers. And it's not always the case that those individuals understand what the requirements are under the Public Records Act as well. So for example, the records that our office creates are often considered public records as well. And so if a city gets a public records request and we have records that would be responsive, they really should be checking with us too to do a search for our records and providing those to the agency. So what is a public record? So this is the definition from the Public Records Act, and it's really any writing that relates to the conduct of government or performance of any governmental or proprietary function that's prepared, owned, used, or retained by the local agency. So the definition of writing is pretty broad. It really is any sort of medium. So it can include your paper documents, it can include videos, it can include your web content, it can be text messages, emails, etc. It can also include social media posts. So we're going to talk a little bit about things such as social media, text messages, and records that are maintained on personal devices and personal accounts of agency employees and officials in just a little bit. So one thing to keep in mind is there's a difference between requests for records versus requests for information. So requests, there we go. Again, requests for records are those writings that relate to the conduct of government and that are prepared, owned, used, or retained by the public agency. A record has to be identifiable. That really means that the agency has to be able to reasonably locate that record, and it needs to be something that's in existence at the time that the request is made. So if someone just says, I want all records related to that thing, well, that's not identifiable. What is that thing, right? But if someone says, I want all records related to the May 12th City Council meeting, then those are things that the agency can reasonably locate because it is identifiable within the meaning of the Public Records Act. So a request for information, on the other hand, is really when a requester is asking questions or asking for information and not actually asking for records. So for example, two different ways you can think about it are if a requester asks for a copy of your public records policy, that is a request for records. But if they send you an email where they say, I'd like to know how the city handles public records requests, that's not a request for records, that's a request for information. And there's no requirement under the Public Records Act that you respond to requests for information. Sometimes you might still want to do that because it's good customer service, and it also might keep it from the requester making a later request that's broader than what, broader than the question is really asking in the first place. So, that's just something to keep in mind. But agencies are not required to do research on behalf of requesters or to explain records to requesters. They're really just required under the PRA to provide records. So let's talk about how to respond to public records requests. So these are just the basic steps of a public records request. So your public records officer receives the request, or someone else within your agency receives the request, and then they forward it on to the public records officer. The agency then has 5 days to respond to the request. You can respond in a couple of different ways that we'll talk about in just a moment. If the records are readily available, you go ahead and provide the records. If they're not, then you have to provide a reasonable estimate of time that's required to respond to the request. That estimate of time might be based on the need to provide third-party notice or to seek clarification. Depending on the request, maybe it's a really large volume of records, so you might give more time to respond if there's a really large volume of records, or workload considerations, need to consult with legal because their records might be exempt. Those are all reasons why you might that factor into your estimate of time. Again, it has to be reasonable. The model rules really caution against using blanket, like 30-day estimate of time for every single request that you receive, because it's really dependent on the language of the request itself. So for example, if you have a request for a copy of Ordinance 123, that's very quick. You could just provide that right away versus I want a copy of every single record that the city manager has ever touched and has ever looked at. That's going to take a lot more time. And so you would maybe provide the record for Ordinance 123 within that 5 days, but if the requester is asking for something that might take you more time to compile, then you would provide an estimate of time that's pushed out a little bit. If you're not providing records within that 5 days, then you are doing your search for records, and we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do for your search. After you have identified responsive records and you provide those to the requester, you can do that in installments. You can also extend that estimate of time if needed. So if originally you gave a 30-day estimate of time, you started working on it, there's still more records, you can provide a new estimate of time. It's just really important to make sure that you're being consistent with your documentation on pushing out the request or the estimate of time date so that you don't forget about that requester. And then at the very end, you document closing your request. So I mentioned within the 5 days, you are able to respond in one of 5 different ways. And we refer to this as the 5-day letter. So within 5 days, you have to do one of the following: either provide the record, provide an internet address and link to your agency's website where the records can be found. You can't provide them a link to some other agency's website. So I'm not sure if Bothell had this request, but a few years ago, a lot of agencies received a request for audit records. And instead of providing a link to their own website with audit records, they would provide links to the state auditor's website, and that would not be compliant with this requirement of the Public Records Act. If the requester says that they don't have access to the internet, then you still have to provide the records, or you have to give them access to computers so that an agency computer, so that they can review the records. Another option is acknowledging receipt of the request and then providing a reasonable estimate of time needed to respond. So that is if you need more time to respond because maybe of workload considerations again, or you have to search for the records. The next option is if a portion of the request is unclear, or if the entire request is unclear, you can acknowledge receipt of the request, ask for clarification, and then still provide a reasonable estimate of time required to respond. You have to provide that estimate of time even if the request isn't clear. If the request is if the requester doesn't clarify, however, after you've asked for that clarification and the entire request is unclear, then you no longer need to respond to the request. If they don't respond, but a portion of the request is clear and another portion is not, you only have to respond to the clear portion. So if, for example, they have like 2 things that they're looking for, I want a copy of Ordinance 123 and a copy of that document that the mayor was looking at the council meeting. Well, we don't know what that means. And so you might ask for clarification on that second part. Let's say the requester doesn't respond. You don't have to then respond to that second part of the request, but you'd still provide a copy of Ordinance 123. And then finally, the other option within those 5 days is to deny the request. So if you don't have records, if they're not records of your agency, then you would just simply deny the request. So searching for records. Again, if you receive a request and you need to do your search, you have to conduct an adequate search for responsive records. It's really important to think about the context of a request and not just rely on things like keywords or computer searches, because you really need to think about all the places that records are reasonably likely to exist. That can be paper records, that can be electronic records, it can be audio recordings, etc. I also had to think about all the people who might know where responsive records exist. So again, we shouldn't just be relying on IT staff or your public records officer to do a search without consulting the agency staff members and officials who might have more background on where responsive records might reasonably be likely to exist. You should be really consulting all the people who have knowledge on the underlying facts of the request. All right, exemptions. See, I told you, we're flying through this, flying through it. So there are times when all or a portion of a record might be exempt from disclosure. But one thing to keep in mind is that the courts have really emphasized that records are presumed to be open. So it's only when there is an exemption that you can point to that either prohibits the disclosure of the record or exempts the record that you would withhold any part of it. These exemptions are narrowly construed. There are exemptions that are within the Public Records Act itself, but also exemptions that are found in other laws. And so again, you are required to have a list of exemptions from that are found in other laws outside of the Public Records Act. There are also resources with that information on the Washington Sunshine Committee's website. But ultimately, if a request is exempt, you would only withhold the exempt portion. If there are portions of a record that are non-exempt, you would still release those portions, just redacting out the exempt portions. So a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, we can't give that out, it's confidential or it's private. Well, one thing to keep in mind is that there is no general right to privacy in the Public Records Act. There might be an element of an exemption that invokes this privacy exemption, and if so, then the test is that privacy is only invaded if the disclosure would be, one, highly offensive to the reasonable person and not of legitimate concern to the public. But again, it needs to be a prong of another exemption. It is not a standalone exemption. So if there's no such thing as, oh, well, this is private and it would violate someone's right to privacy, only if it is part of another exemption. One place that we see that, for example, is in personnel records. It'll say, information that's maintained in files for public employees to the extent that it would violate their right to privacy, and that's where you would put it. You would do that test. All right, text messages, social media, and other electronic records. So this comes up quite a bit, and we've seen some changes within the last several years related to text messages and social media, because I think we're just seeing more use of that within public agencies. So the courts have made it really clear that text messages and social media posts on the personal devices and in personal accounts of public agency employees or officials may be public records that are subject to the Public Records Act if, one, again, the record relates to the conduct of government, and two, was prepared within the scope of that individual's employment or their official capacity. And what that means is when the position requires it, the public agency directs it, or when it furthers the agency's interests. If there is a requirement that you search a personal device or a personal account, then you have to fill out what's commonly referred to as a Nissen affidavit. This test that's outlined above, that is from Nissen versus Pierce County. One thing to keep in mind is that agency does not have an obligation to do a forensic search of private devices. Sorry. The courts have talked about how that could be an unlawful search under the Constitution, so that's just something to keep in mind. You really are relying on your agency employees and officials to perform that search themselves. The agency wouldn't ever demand, give me your device and we're going to do a forensic search to make sure that you don't have any responsive records. So one thing to keep in mind when we're dealing with this issue of things like, whether it was within the scope of employment or official capacity, is, again, you have to look at this test, but when you're looking at the test, we don't have a whole lot of guidance from the courts. One case that I like to point out is the West versus City of Puyallup case, where we were dealing with Facebook posts of a council member. There, this council member was posting about things like events that were happening within the city, and things such as, like road projects, I believe, was one of the topics that she had posted about. It was also on her original campaign Facebook page. Well, what the court had talked about was that her posts were really merely informational, and they didn't directly address the conduct or performance of government functions. So they might be public records, but they weren't public records per se. And in that particular matter, the court said that these posts about goings-on within the city were really only tangentially beneficial to the agency's interests. But the court did call out the fact that these posts did not contain specific details of the council member's work as a council member, and did not include information regarding city council discussions, decisions, and other actions. So I think that this case really does kind of clue us in that if the posts or, for example, text messages did include specific details about a council member's work as a city council member or discussions that were before the council, that those might be considered public records. So that's just something to keep in mind when you might be using your personal devices and accounts for sending or posting messages. So some best practices. It's really important to avoid commingling your personal and official accounts whenever possible. Having disclaimers on your personal page that includes things like, this is your personal account, and all posts are strictly my own, and not, the posts of the city of Bothell. That's really important because it creates a presumption that it is personal and not public. If someone is reaching out to you on your personal account or personal devices, it's really important to direct them back to official methods of communication, such as an official phone number or official email. Again, whenever you are doing a search for records responsive to a public records request using on your personal devices or on your personal accounts, you have to fill out that NISN affidavit. Also, social media is here to stay, and so don't be scared of using it, but just be really mindful about how you do use it. I know, a few years ago when people first started using social media, I was, don't do it, but now we're at a point where I think it's really, the cat's out of the bag, we're doing it, people are using social media, and there are really some benefits to using social media, but just really be mindful about it. Yes.
How long ago was that your stance?
Oh,
can you name a year?
Name a year? Oh gosh, it's probably been at least 8 years or so.
That matches my understanding.
Yeah, the Nissen case came out in 2015, and the West versus Puyallup case came out in 2018, and that case was you better watch what you're doing. But now we're kind of at a point where I think we just see social media has such a benefit to public agencies that we're just seeing it used so much more. So just really be mindful about how you use it.
Right. And it also sounds like there's been enough time to establish some norms and patterns of behavior that people understand are either reasonable or out of scope. And okay.
Yeah. Thanks. And then again, having policies regarding your text message and social media use is really important. And that's another thing that we've seen within these last, 7 or 8 years is a change in the policies that agencies have. Back at that time, a lot of agencies didn't have policies on what to do about using your personal devices and personal accounts. It's still really important to use your official accounts whenever possible, but I also recognize that people do use their personal accounts. One other thing I want to keep in mind is that some use of social media can implicate some First Amendment considerations. It's not directly related to the Public Records Act, but just something to keep in mind when you're doing things like blocking people on social media. That can potentially raise some First Amendment concerns. So I would suggest avoid blocking other users, like specific users. If you don't allow any comments, that's one thing, but I wouldn't remove one particular person's comments over other people's comments simply because you don't like what they're saying, because that could potentially start getting into the realm of protected activity under the First Amendment. Of course, that person, you would have to have actual speaking authority on behalf of the city for it to really implicate the city with liability, but it's just better to not even go down that road if you can avoid it. All right, so this was a specific request, do you have a question? Yeah.
About the last slide.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
So with personal social media accounts and blocking, I think I blocked 2 Bothell residents, and I mean, it was due to harassment. So, and if it's my personal account that I'm very clear is not for city work, you're not saying don't do that. You're saying if you're using it for official.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yes. All right, body worn cameras. So this was something that was specifically requested that we talk about today. So just some basics. Body worn cameras have their own procedures within the Public Records Act. And there are specific requirements if you're making a request for body-worn camera footage. You have to include the name of the person or persons who are involved in the incident. You have to include an incident or case number, the date, time, and location of the incident or incidents, and you have to you have to identify a law enforcement or corrections officer that is involved in the incident. If you don't include all of that information, then there's no responsibility for responding to that request. So you can also recoup redaction fees from certain requesters. That is not for everybody. Certain types of requesters, you cannot charge them. Those are people who are directly involved in the incident or their attorneys. If the person is requesting information that's relevant to a criminal case involving that person, and some other individuals, like some other government individuals who do not have to pay for that redaction fee. There are some rebuttable presumptions of highly offensive depictions that we'll talk about in just a moment. And as far as penalties are concerned, I know we haven't talked about penalties yet, but for penalties, there has to be a showing of bad faith or gross negligence. So there are some exemptions for body-worn cameras that are really important to keep in mind. So these are prohibitions in the Public Records Act. So a lot of the exemptions in the Public Records Act itself are not prohibitions. They are just, these records are exempt and the agency can withhold or redact the records. However, in the body-worn camera section, these are prohibitions. So you cannot disclose body-worn camera footage to the extent that they're exempt under this particular subsection. This is one of those exemptions that includes that right to privacy prong. So they are exempt to the extent that non-disclosure is essential for the protection of any person's right to privacy. There can be multiple body-worn camera exemptions that apply, and also exemptions outside of the Public Records Act or the body-worn camera context. And there are certain areas that are presumed to be highly offensive. So here is a list of the things that are presumed to be highly offensive that are contained directly within this body-worn camera exemption. There are things like the interior of a residence, minors, certain healthcare information, deceased persons. All of those things need to be blacked out in the body-worn camera footage to the extent someone is making a request for those things. It's also important to keep in mind that there might be other things that are shown within body-worn camera footage that need to be blacked out, such as, police have their screens up sometimes in their cars, and it might have like NCIC information, for example. Those types of things also need to be mindful that those might need to be blacked out, or passwords or things like that. But those are a little bit different than these specific exemptions that are contained within the body-worn camera section.
Anne-Marie, real quick, I think the next couple of sections are really ones that might be good reference material for council to refer back to and staff handle for them. Would you be comfortable skipping forward to the Open Public Meetings Act on slide 34?
I would love to skip forward.
right.
That sounds wonderful.
Can I say something? I was going to say, nice work, Chief, for including body-worn cameras in here.
All right.
Definitely knew it was of interest.
Okay, so you can read all about legal challenges and penalties and all that fun stuff later, and your requirements to retain records under the retention requirements. All right, OPMA. So, as you all know, the OPMA requires that all meetings of the governing bodies of a public agency have to be open to the public. So that includes not just your city council, but other governing bodies of the agency. So that those are your multi-member boards, commissions, committees, councils, or other policy or rulemaking bodies, or committees thereof when they're acting on behalf of the governing body, conducting hearings, or taking testimony or public comment. Does not apply to entities like the courts, the legislature, private organizations. This is really for public agencies. So what is a meeting? I love the definitions in the Public Records Act because they're so helpful. A meeting is meetings at which action is taken. I love when you have a definition that includes the defined term in the definition. So, right. So really a meeting is when you have a quorum and you're taking action. Right, I mean, yes, I think it's so much fun, these wonderful definitions. So what is action? So this is a transaction of official business, including decision-making, which is your final action, deliberation, and even discussion. So if you don't have a quorum, then you don't have a meeting, no exceptions. So again, what constitutes action? Again, there are different types of action. There's just action where you are just transacting your business, and that can just be things like receiving public testimony, having deliberations, having discussions. It can include your final action, but your final action really is that collective positive or negative decision, often taken by vote, of a majority of members of your governing body. All final action has to be taken in a meeting open to the public. So a couple of examples of meetings. Things like email conversations can be meetings, serial phone calls, texting and text messaging that have a quorum of your governing body involved can be considered meetings. A quorum in the parking lot, or having dinner or cocktail party or site visit where you're talking about agency business might be considered a meeting. So it's just really important that you keep that in mind when you have a quorum that is engaging in any sort of discussion regarding discussion or action regarding your agency business, that it could potentially constitute a meeting. You know, I mentioned serial phone calls. Serial meetings are those meetings where the majority of the governing body might gather either in person, on the phone, or in emails in smaller groups, but collectively take action, even though the majority is never part of one communication. So you can have a situation where Councilmember A calls Councilmember B calls Councilmember C calls Councilmember D, and they're all talking about, hey, did you hear Councilmember A? They're going to vote this way. Oh yeah, I'm going to vote this way too. And now you have a quorum of the council who's taking some sort of action together. It still requires that collective intent to meet. So, if council members A and B and C have a discussion and they don't realize that somebody else, already had a discussion with, Councilmember D, that's not necessarily a collective intent to meet. And passive receipt of information is not considered an OPMA violation. So when you have a situation where, someone accidentally replies all to an email, that is often simply passive receipt of information and not necessarily an OPMA violation. So special meetings, again, we have a really helpful definition in the or in the OPMA. It's those meetings that are not regularly scheduled. So again, really helpful. When you have a special meeting, you have to have 24 hours notice, and you cannot take final action on any things that are not on the agenda. So that's something that's really important. If you're planning to take final action, it has to be noted on the agenda. Yes.
So for example, in a special meeting, you wouldn't necessarily amend the agenda to add a new item and then make a vote, take a vote on that item. It would have to be noticed 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, you could discuss something, but you can't take final action.
Yeah, you could propose putting it on a future agenda, and then it would be noticed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you propose putting it on a future agenda if discussing it wasn't even on your special meeting agenda, though? You couldn't add a new topic of discussion.
You can have a discussion topic. You just can't take final action. So, and again, final action is that collective positive or negative decision-making or vote to do something. So, that having just mere discussion, that is not final action.
Okay.
All right. And then for special meetings, notice isn't required if there is an emergency or if there's some sort of impending injury or damage that could result. Agendas, you have to have your agendas available online 24 hours in advance of the meeting. There are a few exceptions to that. The first one doesn't apply to you because you do have a website and you do employ more than 10 full-time employees. But again, you're not restricted from later modifying your agenda. And ultimately, if you had not posted your agenda, it doesn't invalidate otherwise legal action that was taken at a regular meeting, even if your agenda wasn't posted in advance. So executive sessions, those are those portions of a regular or special meeting where members of the public are not able to attend for limited purposes that are listed in the OPMA. Some common examples of when you would have an executive session are when you have personnel issues, so such as to review complaints or charges regarding a public employee, or to review the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or performance of a public employee. Another option is for litigation or potential litigation or legal risks. This is the only executive session provision that requires a specific person to be there. You have to have your legal counsel present in an executive session for this purpose. All other executive session types, really it's just the people who need to know, the people who need to be there can be in the room. Doesn't need to be just city council members. Another time that we see executive sessions used is when you're dealing with real estate negotiation or publicly bid contracts, when having that discussion in the open meeting could potentially increase costs to the agency. So there are a couple of requirements before you go into an executive session. You have to have the presiding officer announce the purpose of the executive session, typically with the RCW, along with the estimated time. You can extend that time if needed. So if you said it's going to be 15 minutes and you're in the executive session, you need more time, you just have to come back out into the open session and announce how much more time you need. You would have your discussion in the executive session that is not open to the public, but any decisions actually need to be made within the open meeting, and secret ballots are not allowed. So when you're looking at potential OPMA violations, there is a test that the courts have developed, and it's when, number one, a majority of the council meets, two, with the collective intent to transact official business, and three, during the meeting, the council members take action as defined by the OPMA. And again, keep in mind that action can include simply discussing. So even if you're not taking any sort of vote, that could potentially be considered an OPMA violation. So what are the penalties for a violation? Well, first of all, actions that are taken in violation of the OPMA are null and void. You know, it's a little difficult when you're dealing with pure discussion. How do you declare a discussion null and void? It's basically the discussion never happened, but it is included in the definition of action, so that's just something to keep in mind. There can be personal liability for each governing body member who attends a meeting in violation of the OPMA and who knows that it is in violation of the OPMA. There's a civil penalty for each person who is involved in that meeting, $500 for the first offense, and then $1,000 for any subsequent offenses. Can also be used as grounds for a recall. The agency can also have some liability. If a person prevails against the agency in court, they can get their costs and attorney's fees. But I think almost most importantly is you can potentially lose the public's trust. Even if it's inadvertent, you know, maybe you didn't realize that, you know, oops, we waded into the territory of having a discussion and there's a majority of us, or, you know, it occurred on email or something like that. The very fact that it happened, I think, can really help to erode that public trust. So that's just something to keep in mind. Some OPMA best practices and other considerations. You know, there are other ways that you can communicate, you know, outside of open meetings that are still allowed. So, you know, one thing, if there's stuff to talk about, just meet more frequently. If you have decisions that need to be made, meet more frequently. I'm sure everyone loves hearing that, but it is an option. You can also filter information through other staff members or through your city manager. So, you know, if there are questions, you know, and you want to have a discussion about it, your city manager or staff members might be able to help you get answers to those things without involving other council members. You know, again, just keep in mind that a quorum, you know, is 4, so just try not to discuss anything related to the city outside of an open meeting with more than 2 council members, and, you know, also keep in mind who those people might have already talked to so that you're not involving a quorum. And then when in doubt, just have an open meeting. Again, meet more frequently. I say that because I'm here tonight, but not normally, so meet more frequently, everyone. With some kind of best practices for, some best practices for executive sessions. Try not to overuse executive sessions. I've seen agencies that look for any reason to have an executive session as possible because they don't want to talk about something in the public, but you know, there are times that the public really does have the right to know what is going on, and so, you know, it's better to just have those discussions in the open meeting when possible. Stay on topic during the executive session. These reasons for executive sessions are pretty narrow, and we've seen the courts have looked at that very narrowly and said, hey, the exception is only to talk about price of real estate. You can't talk about anything else related to the negotiation of the real estate. You can only talk about price. And so it's just really important to stay on topic. Let the public know if you might be taking action following an executive session. A lot of times you'll have members of the public who will stick around if they think that there might be action that's taken. But if you're not going to be taking action, let people know so then they can go home if they don't want to sit around and wait. After you have your executive session, and if you are going to be making a final decision, consider discussing that item in the open meeting so people understand what is going on. Of course, there are going to be times that you might not be able to do that because it might be, it might be confidential, or it might be, it might increase like legal risks or whatnot. But because you're not going to want to discuss what you talked about in the executive session, but you might want to provide some context as to why you're taking a particular vote. Couple other best practices: avoiding situations that might create the appearance of an OPMA violation, avoiding text messaging during meetings. I've seen this happen before with agencies where a council member was up on the dais and they were sending a text message, and then later on, another council member looks at their phone, and it created this appearance that they were texting each other. And that then had resulted in public records requests and other, allegations of some sort of impropriety. So just kind of keep that in mind, that it just doesn't really look good. Also, just helps to make it appear that you actually are paying attention if you're not on your phone. And then be careful when you're using social media. I mean, we've talked about social media quite a bit, but you can run into issues with OPMA when you're using social media. So if a council member posts something online, or if the city posts something online, and then multiple council members start responding to it, and all of a sudden you have a majority of the council members who have responded, now that could potentially be considered an OPMA violation depending on the circumstances. And also just keep in mind that, you want to make sure that you're being fair. And so what you don't want to do is hurry up and have 3 people respond to a post. And so then that kind of makes it so that the others can't respond, because if they do, then that could potentially be an OPMA violation. So just one other thing to keep in mind. All right, I've got a bunch of resources here that, again, you can check out this evening before you go to bed. They're very fascinating, help you fall asleep. And other than that, I'm happy to take any other questions that you have. I know I went through that all very quickly, but it's a lot of material, so might take you some time to digest.
I have some niche questions that I will not bother my colleagues with right now. Should we email Eileen or you or both of you?
Either. Yeah, either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I guess if it's something specific to the presentation, feel free to email me, but otherwise, either is fine.